What is up, fellow sickos? I am Dan Valley coming at you, as always, with the one, the only, the legendary, the certified fantabulous, Mr. Grant Hughes. It's Western Conference trade deadline primer time. Seems like we might have some news and rumors to talk about. Who knows? We already did the East, so if you haven't gone to check out that episode, it was short. It was only like 2 hours and 18 minutes long or something like that. So if you just that'll take you no time at all to consume. Before we get started, Mr. Grant Hughes. I don't know why I full named you there, but how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm excited that it's a double hat episode and for no other reasons. If you're listening to this, that doesn't make sense. But if you're watching,
this can't be the first double hat episode, right?
It's probably not, but they're rare. They're rare. We don't coordinate hat versus no hat, but we just on the same page today. I feel like that bodes well. It means our synergy is going to be just top notch today.
Is that like an analog for groupthink where we're just going to agree with whatever the other person says?
Yeah, because that'd be pretty different, right?
Right. We're used to just disagreeing a bunch. Although even a backstory, I was doing something that could technically turn into a podcast, but ranking every team's 3 most likely players to be traded. I had a tough time with the Warriors, so naturally I text you, and I'm like, okay, so these are the 3. I was expecting either add this guy or shift the order, and you text back like, no, that's exactly how I'd have them. And I was just like, so we're just like completely just we're like on the same page to maybe an unsettling degree at this point.
A little bit. Or that's just the right answer. And we both acknowledge it's the right answer. Let's go with that.
I choose to accept that. Any overarching thoughts before we get into this Western Conference trade deadline primer?
I think, how about this, Dan? I think the West is the more interesting conference to discuss, even though Jimmy Butler does not play in it. How about that?
Yet.
So far.
First up, Grant's Sacramento Kings, because we're going all sorts of orders today, just based off the news and things that could be ruined. And if Dan has to do anything in some post editing, maybe it's born from convenience or making his life just a little bit easier. And especially Grant, too, when I text him to re-record all of this. We start with the Kings. Before we get into the vitals, I don't know how much any of this matters now. De'Aaron Fox has made it be known. I did a little solo shindig, so we're going to get Grant's thoughts here now on the De'Aaron Fox trade request. It definitely wasn't a demand. Rich Paul informed them, this is per multiple outlets now, that the Kings would be better off moving him. However, ESPN 1320 has reported, Damian Barling, I believe is his name, that De'Aaron Fox will only sign an extension with the Spurs or the Kings. And so it makes me feel like, are the Kings still involved here? And then, of course, Shams confirmed that report earlier on Wednesday that the Spurs are, in fact, De'Aaron Fox team of choice. I'll run through their vitals very quickly, but I want Grant's thoughts on the De'Aaron Fox situation. As of now, they're $3.2 million below the tax. They owe their 25 first to Atlanta. There's top 12 protected, shifts to top 10 next year, and then it becomes 2 seconds. They also owe a 2031 first-round swap to San Antonio. So they can, in theory, trade 3 first-round picks, one of them being conditional, and then, or less favorable, excuse me, and then up to 3 swaps. However, Grant, let's start. What are your thoughts on the De'Aaron Fox situation before we get into how it impacts what the Kings can, will, or should do at the deadline?
I mean, it's complicated, certainly. The timing is, I guess, surprising because since Doug Christie took over, the vibes have been better and the winning has happened. Although I think you would say, well, if Fox's continued commitment to the franchise was dependent on, them proving they can level up and continue to compete and improve, and it took a run like this to get to, okay, maybe they're a playoff team now, it took that doesn't. So in some sense, that's not surprising, especially measured against just he's been there since 2017 and he's seen, I think it's 5 head coaches, and was there for a lot of the Vlade Divac era, which is, certainly not as crazy as some of the DeMarcus Cousins era stuff that was happening with Mike Malone and all, but still not a paragon of a functional organization. So I guess I'm not surprised. I don't blame him. I think in a weird way, I almost tell me what you think about this. I think collectively we don't love it when Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving decide we're going to sign with Brooklyn together because we're whatever. It feels different when you're I want to go play with that guy. He seems really good. I feel like great things could happen there because we're talking about Wembanyama. I I understand it, one, and for some reason it feels, I don't know, I like that more than just like, hey gang, let's get together and like conspire to sign deals on some other team. I don't know why. I think I respect the idea of like, I'll go be number two to this
Yeah.
generational guy. It doesn't happen a lot, right? Because we don't get a lot of Wembys, but I kind of enjoy that part of it. It sucks for Kings fans because they're just like, can we please have a nice thing once in a while? And the answer seems to be no. It's pretty brutal, but I get it. I think like if I were him, I think I'd do the same thing and would have done it sooner. But it's rough, like, because from a fan's perspective, you're like, we just went 10-2 or whatever it is, and now we're doing this. You want out? That's it's got to sting a little bit, but yeah, I don't know. Mixed thoughts, I guess, if you can't tell from my meandering explanation there.
Do you fault how much blame do you ascribe to De'Aaron Fox for this, or looking at the timing, because they are 11-4 in their last 15? This is also, as I mentioned, right out of the Clutch Sports playbook. There's like a year and change before he hits free agency. As I also mentioned, I still find it funny. Schmidt Dua pointed out that in 2019, on the same exact date,
Right.
Anthony Davis did the same thing to New Orleans. Or do you really just fall almost entirely on the side of, you kind of just said it, he's seen a lot, been through a lot, and even as the Kings have gotten away from hashtag Kangs, there's
Yeah.
always been traces of that operational dysfunction when you look at the structure of their front office, the way the Mike Brown extension was handled. And
Mhm.
I'm wondering, the bigger thing, maybe not even the Mike Brown firing, but did the franchise do enough to take that firing off of De'Aaron Fox's shoulders, aside from kind of noting in that, I think it was the ESPN Shelburne piece, that they didn't consult with
Yeah.
Sabonis or Fox, or DeRozan was thrown in there like he should have any sort of say in what's happening with this organization. It's like, what are you sort of, if you're playing the blame game here, do you look at this Fox trade demand and view it as a premature bailout in any way? Or do
I
you think
think
he's earned the right to get to this place?
I think the criticism you can level at him, or the blame you can lay at Fox's feet, is the same you would lay at any player's feet who signed a contract for a certain amount of time and then wants out of it before it has expired, which is like, that always feels kind of stupid, because it's the old argument, the team can trade you whenever they want. So in theory, like, just if you sign a contract, it's not as simple as saying like, you're Jimmy Butler, you signed that deal, you got to play it out. You made an agreement. Fox, you signed this deal, you got to play it. That's just not how it
He's
works. So
also,
that's
unlike
like
Jimmy Butler, he's not withholding services.
right. Yeah, he actually is continuing to play. So like that tiny little kernel of blame, I guess you could lay it. It's really just like, this has been one of the most like haphazardly run franchises for close to 25 years. Fox has been there for like 7 of those, 8 almost. And the constant is the management and ownership just not making great decisions, or being capricious, or chasing the wrong things. And like you mentioned this, just like, forget all that higher level stuff, like, find a backup big. Don't add DeMar DeRozan to a team that has a bunch of backcourt. You know what I mean? Like, we didn't hate the DeRozan move, like, as a value proposition, but that's not what they needed. Everybody would concede that. So just from like a basic roster construction standpoint, the Kings have not done what Fox wants, which is to take the types of swings and make the types of moves that like lift your ceiling and make it so like a playoff berth isn't the pinnacle of this era. Like that's a fair criticism, right? The Kings haven't like knocked any moves out of the park. So, great. They've done some good things. This isn't the same as it was 10 years ago, because that was like as badly as you can run an organization. But still, if you're defending the Kings, right, and you want to lay all the blame at Fox's feet, like, what's your argument? I don't like, oh, he's abandoning ship. Like, all right, I mean, it's sinking. What are you? Or it's not exactly powering forward, in a way that makes you confident. I guess maybe that's the better way to put it.
I've also seen, and I want to know if this stance would be defensible by the Kings, which I did not touch upon because I didn't see it when I was recording about the specific rumor, that this wasn't necessarily even a trade request. It was more of like just an FYI, this is where we're at, and the Kings are proactively shopping Fox. Is that, if you're hearing the messaging of like, De'Aaron Fox isn't happy, doesn't think this roster is good enough, and we're going to get to a point over the offseason where he would request a trade, if that's the messaging, if you're the Kings, does it make more sense to proactively get here and one, let it leak out that you're proactively shopping Fox, or should you be doing everything in your power to shift his perception? Again, I'm assuming that there would be a chance that he is still willing to stick around.
Yeah, I don't know that the willingness to stick around. I don't know. It feels like the bridge is sort of burned. Feels that way, but you never know. I guess like okay. Here's in one sense, I understand the Kings, kind of sort of trying to get out ahead of this, or at least act as quickly as they can, because you look at this trade market and every major name we've talked about for several months is like, I don't know, like how valuable is Jimmy Butler? How valuable is Zach LaVine? Like, are we really going to give up 2 firsts for that? Like Bradley Beal's a negative. And then if you put Fox on that market as the Kings, you're like, we got the guy now. Like you should give us 3 firsts for this. We have like if we're drafting, this is the total mixed metaphor, but like if you're going to draft the available players at this deadline, Fox is number 1, right? Just he's 27. He's, in his prime. You could get the most for him of anybody that's actually available. Problem is he only wants to go to one team, and you probably should have known that. So if that was like an oversight, then you kind of blew it. But I can understand from the Kings' perspective overall, like this feels done. It feels broken. Why not just try to, let's get this out there now, as opposed to like because then what's the rest of your season look like if he's just there after having, we've seen it with Anthony Davis and the Pelicans. I guess it's just awkward and it sucks, and you'll probably have some quote unquote injury arise. That's no good.
So I'll get to that. But the one thing I'm wondering, and I did mention this already, was how much of the openness to staying is, if I make All NBA, you can give me a $340+ million extension. I don't think he's going to make All NBA. And so that's their only chance of keeping him. Then, yeah, it would make sense to be proactive. They could be annoyed by the timing just because it's so close to the trade deadline. It does seem like there were warning signs, though, because of the previous discussions that we know they had. But what this does do for them that makes it more challenging is you are now tasked with, he's giving you the one team. And this hasn't been like, there was also reporting that said he will be open to other teams. So this isn't like a staunch one-team trade demand, but the timing of it, it's so hard for other teams to decide whether they're going to cobble together offers, especially if they're not on Fox's list. And I will say, I think you've removed at least one, what some people thought could have been a major suitor for him from the equation. Houston has no business making a mega move in the middle of the year. Like I've seen a team mentioned for him. They might decide, look at what Amen Thompson's doing right now. Like he's changing directions on the ball so fast that it looks like he's traveling forward in time. So why would we want someone like De'Aaron Fox? But there's at least a possibility if you wait to the offseason and they've gone through the playoff crucible with this current group and say, oh, no, we do need someone like De'Aaron Fox. But you've already, like Houston, at least in my view, is a non-starter. So that's one potential, just like, someone, even if someone in the woodwork that could come out and drum up the value of Fox if you're dealing with only 1 or 2 teams at the moment. And we're going to talk about San Antonio in a little bit, so I don't want to go into them. But I wanted to ask you, are there any teams like other than San Antonio that you could see coming in at least fairly aggressive for? Oh, no, actually, I'm sorry. We should start here. I think there's a right answer here as to what should the Kings be targeting in a De'Aaron Fox trade. But how do you, if they do move him, do you expect them to prioritize the future-driven return, or is it going to be trying to maximize what they can do in the more immediate term?
That's a great question. I think you and I would say you're going to need some draft picks, and that should be the focus. Because if you lose Fox, you're not getting back a player or players that are as good as him, and the team's not good enough as it is. So, like, you're really going to just spin the wheels for a few more years, and Sabonis then ages out eventually, and like, where are you? I feel like this is kind of what you're alluding to, which is like, I don't think it's a great position to be in the business of, we will take back draft picks that belong to the Spurs from the Spurs if you're trading him to the Spurs, because those picks are not going to be very good unless Wemby gets hurt. Like that's right. So you need to be looking at some of those Hawks picks, maybe getting back one of your own, like that kind of thing. Pick. Redo that swap so you don't have that 2031 going out.
Yeah, that needs to
take that back. So I don't know if that doesn't really answer your question, because I don't know how. I don't have hugely strong feelings on like you just need a full draft package or something. I don't know if that's available when you've said there's only one team I want to go to and you don't want that team's picks. I think the Kings probably will make something of the wrong decision and try to get back a couple players that just kind of keep them where they are. I don't know. The most complicating factor is the Spurs picks aren't going to be good. And so what are you getting back if and when you trade them to the Spurs? It shouldn't be their own picks, I don't think.
No, I mean, it may be distant ones if you're willing to gamble on that. But I think they have enough stuff from other teams where you have that Bulls pick this year, you have a Minnesota pick, you have 2 Hawks picks, plus if you want the right to swap with Atlanta. So I think there's enough stuff there. I'm coming at it from this end. One, I don't think the current front office of Monte McNair and Wes Wilcox should be in charge of the De'Aaron Fox trade, because I think at this point there's probably pressure on them to keep their jobs. And now is almost the perfect time to clean house, because Doug Christie still has the intern label. So like, you're not married to a head coach. Don't be married to the front office either. And regardless of who's making the trade, you mentioned that it should be a draft oriented return. Maybe they go that route. They need to start over. Mm-hmm. Like it needs to be a clean sweep. And I'm not like, keep Keegan Murray, sure, but like Sabonis, DeMar DeRozan, whether it happens now or the offseason, like you shop those guys. This shouldn't be, let's try and get players who can help us make the playoffs now, or let's get picks that we can then turn into players who do that. We were having trouble with De'Aaron Fox, where it feels like the Kings are 1 or 2 moves away, or in theory should be, from being something special. If you couldn't do that for multiple years when you had De'Aaron Fox and Domas Sabonis and the emergence of Keegan Murray, why do you think that you're going to be able to do it without having De'Aaron Fox? And that's what I would worry about as a Kings fan, is that, starting over would suck. But to me, that is not the right call. It should be the only call.
Yeah, that's so hard. I mean, we collectively, like in the media, I guess, like romanticize the blow it up a lot, just because it seems so easy. Let's start over. This isn't any good. But then like, we're not fans who have to think like, okay, so for like 4 years now, we're just going to be like hoping one of these draft picks hits. Like, after we just made the playoffs for the first time in forever a couple of years ago, like we got to go back to this. Like, that's such a daunting proposition. It doesn't mean I think it's the right move still. It's just that's such a brutal thing to have to deal with. You asked for another team. Like, Houston makes sense, but is out. The Spurs make sense, but we've already talked about the complications there. That'll probably be where it ends up being. Is Orlando, like, should they be like coming down the pipelines? We've said they need shooting. Obviously, Fox doesn't provide that, but at least like we do want a ball handler. We do want a guard there. Does Orlando make any sense, or is that, because that's the only other team that sprang to mind when you asked, besides the obvious?
So I think Orlando actually makes a lot of sense, just because Fox is not the best shooter, but like he's still shooting 37% on step back threes. I think he's at 38% on wide open threes this year. He should get, if the concern is what does he look like playing off the ball more, because we have Franz and Paolo, him hitting those wide open threes should be a good harbinger. And I would assume the quality of his 3-pointers in Orlando would go up, at least during the time he has Franz and Paolo on the floor. So I would argue that they should absolutely be in on him. I don't know how his current and then future salary structure fits within. Right. Okay, we have Franz, Paolo, and Jalen Suggs. Yeah. So is Jalen Suggs going out in that deal? And if he is, that's not happening this season. Mm-hmm. Another team I thought about, unless you have anything else on Orlando.
I was just going to say, we, in addition to the shooting, we harp on the Magic's pace, and Fox has in the past been a guy that is like a transition offense by himself. So you can't the fit, the half court fit is iffy, I think, even in light of the 3-point numbers you mentioned. You would think he would get them up and down a little bit more than they are, right, which would help.
What do you think about, and I do think this is another team that would probably want to wait until the offseason to figure out where they were after the playoffs. Does he make any sense for OKC?
Oh, wow. I mean, you have similar salary structure questions there, although it's not as far down the line as the Magic are, because you're going to have to pay Chet and Jalen Williams.
And Shea, and then Fox.
Shea's already paid. Yeah, Fox is going to get his. I mean, You better not have any more secondary creation problems if you add De'Aaron Fox to that team. You would think
Right.
that would solve it. He feels like a luxury, but then but is he? Because he does address like pretty specifically what you don't have, which is someone that can very clearly run your offense effectively, like sort of be the guy, whether at second units or with Shea. I wonder. That's interesting. Do you think though that it's a little bit too much of the same thing? Like you're spending so much on a guy that really is doing a lot of what Shea is doing, and so like if you care about the end of of playoff games and they're both on the floor together, are you like really maximizing what that 5-man unit could be? I don't know. I'm just
And would there be a similar? I mean, look at the marginalization effect of Keegan Murray on offense with DeMar DeRozan, Malik Monk, and Domas and Fox. Is there any of that with Jalen Williams or Chet Holmgren when you throw Fox into the equation?
Yeah, I mean probably less because I think both, yeah, Chet and J-Dub can impact the game without having the ball. Probably are best at impacting the game without having the ball, but it's like it is reductive, but it's like it's the one ball thing. Like there's only one basketball. Like you have Shea, he should have it a lot. And then Fox also is like he can do other stuff, but like clearly he should have the ball a lot if he's in the game. And that a little bit of diminishing returns there. It is fun to though, because OKC could just be like, yeah, we could do that.
No core players and picks,
Yeah.
and like we'll just. I'm not really an advocate of OKC making a move this season, but they were a team. What do you make of? There's been reports that Brooklyn would be interested, and I'm wondering how much of that is through the lens of if he reaches 26 free agency rather than, maybe they'd be interested this offseason after they draft Cooper Flag or like whoever. But it just doesn't seem based off their 2-year timeline. In my head, I'm like, it would make sense if he reaches free agency and they're trying to accelerate their position. But for the next 2 years, I don't know what the value of having him is for them, especially when they would have to give up stuff to get him.
Yeah, because then you're talking about like his age 30 season maybe as being when you've got barely enough surrounding talent, unless you just make another major free agent signing. But I wanted to, so I know you mentioned like, or some of the reporting is that, he might stay, and it's because of the potential for if he makes All NBA a supermax.
Well, that last part, by the way, I'm speculating on.
That's totally it. That's the only reason like he would.
Okay.
But then like if you're the Kings, why on earth do you want to put yourself in that situation where the only reason the guy is staying is because like, yeah, well, you're the only team that's going to be able to give me this massive raise, this contract that nobody else can. And like the second he signs that, he's going to be like, hey, remember that trade request, guys? It's back. Like that seems like, I think as the Kings, what you really can't do is try to talk yourself into the idea that this is not over. I think you need to operate as the Kings from the perspective of like, he's not part of our future. The only thing we got to figure out is how to get the most for him. Like, I just can't see a scenario where he comes back or plays the rest of the season, signs that extension, and is like, we're good now. Like, right? Like, that's just so unrealistic to me.
Unless there's been like a different message conveyed than what would like it's going beyond that, where it's I want you to make a move or I'm gone. And if it was that, I want you to make a move or I'm gone, and the Kings then proceeded to shop him, it's just idiotic. But yeah. I don't like. I saw some people too saying I think there's a world in which the Kings trade De'Aaron Fox and get better. I don't see it. The two scenarios I thought of, if you were trying to just replicate some of it, is does Miami get in as part of a Jimmy Butler trade and say, if they're getting a first or 2 firsts for him or a young player, that goes to Sacramento, then they're investing Tyler Hero and some of their own remaining draft equity to Sacramento, where does Tyler Hero, let's say, and a couple first round picks, are you at least comparable and then in a situation where you could continue to improve? And then before you even answer that, like the other one would be, is there a way to rope Zach LaVine into any De'Aaron Fox trade and then just reunite him with DeMar DeRozan? I know the way I'm presenting this is pretty clear. I just don't think there's a scenario in which the Kings come out in better shape after they move De'Aaron Fox, but I was just curious what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah, that's a pretty tough sell. I think there's some logic to it. Like, this is a very different conversation if Malik Monk has not like increasingly looked like someone you're kind of fine with as a main on-ball guy. I think Monk actually, he's not Fox, but he's like a legitimate I feel okay if the offense is being run by him and it involves Sabonis and you have DeRozan as a bailout and maybe Keegan Murray's getting more looks now. That's not accounting for whatever else would come back with Fox and how that might affect other guys' roles. It's just, I think we both kind of, I won't speak for you. I still think Fox is the Kings' best player, and it's hard to get better if you're trading your best player, even if you concede that, like, yeah, maybe there's like some spread the wealth positive potential and some, there. It's not crazy, but I don't think it's likely that they're better after they move him.
Now, how does this impact their actual deadline? Is it just they move De'Aaron Fox or they don't, and then you can't do anything else, or at least not anything else major, because like you can't trade a first, like the whole Kevin Huerter, Trey Lyles first round pick, like that's dead. You can't do that now with De'Aaron Fox on his way out.
That to me is the clearest. I would say it sort of puts everything else you might have done otherwise. Chase a second big, like maybe try to get something for like Keon Ellis if you believe in Devin Carter. Like all the stuff we would have otherwise talked about is just kind of like, that's not atop the priority list now. And I think the clearest thing is you cannot be giving up future draft picks, especially your own, if you're about to also trade your best player. Like that just, you have to so how does it change their deadline? It completely changes their deadline behavior. Well, it should.
Now they're sort of stuck in stasis then, is what
a little bit. Yeah. I mean, I think it becomes their to-do list becomes decide whether we're trading Fox now or later. And then if now, get the best we can for him. And then there is no third item. It's just like, you can't also go look for the backup big if it's going to cost you assets. Like, I just don't see how that makes sense.
Well, how do you approach whether he's there, or maybe if he's not there, it happens organically, but you owe your pick to Atlanta top 12 protection. If you still have him on your team, do you shut him down and like make sure you can, they might keep that pick anyway, but do you try and drive up the value of it? Is it like, how do you approach, like, again, I think this is a question whether Fox is there or not. Like, what are you, if he's not there, I guess it's dependent on the return, what they'll do. But if he is there, then do you keep just chugging along and trying to make the playoffs? And maybe you hope that there's a change of heart for some reason and you get more leverage in trade talks over the offseason.
I can understand the appeal of that. But I just don't think I would be too afraid to go forward thinking this was salvageable as the Kings. Like, oh, if we're the best team in the West down the stretch this season, that'll convince him. It's like, I don't think so, because you're weighing this run against 7 years of his experience there.
And also this run might be your, like 11-15 is no joke. Like that might be the pinnacle of your season.
Right. And it's like, and where's that get you? Like, is anybody looking at the Kings after that run saying like, you know what? I kind of like him against Houston or OKC or whoever in a first round series. Like, I don't think so. So yeah. I like, and also, I mean, we talk about this with Philly all the time. It's like, you can't really tank hard enough to make that, you're not going to come out of this with Cooper Flag or anything. And then like, what's the tank even look like? Sabonis is indestructible. He's going to play every night. Sabonis is going to set your floor at like 500. And so, so like, how do you trading him? You shutting him down?
There also might be like, what does De'Aaron Fox, because he's not going to withhold services. Like he's not going to go the Jimmy Butler route.
Doesn't seem like it.
For Jimmy Butler, there's really no value in going the Jimmy Butler route after the trade deadline because you can't be moved. Like it's over. Like the trade deadline is passed.
Right.
He might play. What if he just plays out of his mind because of all this, makes all NBA, and that not makes him stay, but that if he makes an all NBA team, his trade value will go through the roof, even with just a year left on his deal, and proving like, oh, he played the good soldier even after he requested a trade. I will say, I've been an advocate for this before the Fox trade request, but if the price has actually dropped that much to where it's, okay, DeRozan and Huerter and Lyles, and maybe there are seconds involved, this might embolden me to be like, well, let's just see what happens before we move De'Aaron Fox over the summer once we add Jimmy Butler here, who we will also then move over the summer because he's going to have to pick up his player option or a broker, a sign and trade. I'm saying if the price has actually dropped to, oh, we don't need to include Devin Carter or like nothing. It's just the salary, maybe seconds, no swaps, nothing. I would absolutely 100% do it. You're nuked anyway. Why not just, and you're not going to lament losing Trey Lyles, DeMar DeRozan, and let's say it's for nothing, and Jimmy Butler's a rental and just leaves, which, by the way, he won't. Like, he will need your help to get out. Mm-hmm. But if he just leaves, it's all right. Like, our books are cleaner.
Not crazy. I think you do risk Jimmy Butler showing up and being like, I'm not playing here.
Okay, and then what happens? Your draft pick is like
No,
more
you
valuable than this
right.
year
You
for
are.
you?
I think it's. I don't know. There's got to be like a term for it where it's like it's already doomed, and you're just like it's just like a fuck it. Like let's whatever, man. Let's see what happens. Let's steer into the skid.
I don't know what message that sends to Sabonis where it's okay, DeRozan's gone, Jimmy and Fox are angling to maybe Jimmy wants it. Maybe you play so well with the two of them that they both want to stay or something. I have let
Yeah.
it be known I've been Jimmy Butler to the Kings pilled since basically day one. So I'm not the person to, but if the price is really dropped that low and there's not a lot of value moving to De'Aaron Fox now, you're fucked anyways. Like,
Right.
let's just like, why not just add another layer of intrigue to it?
Do you have anything else to add here? Or should we just move to the other potential trade partner here, which is the Spurs?
Yeah, let's get on to the Spurs. You want to take us through their vitals?
Again, this is the first bullet point is like might be able to get De'Aaron Fox, and then after that, we should know that they're 21 million below the tax. They got all their own first. They got to swap with Boston in 28 with top one protection. They got to swap with Dallas or Minnesota in 30. They got to swap with the Kings in 2031. That, by the way, if I'm the Kings, that is a high priority. I'm getting that back if I'm trading you De'Aaron Fox. They have Atlanta's first in 25, 26, 27. The middle one's a swap. They have Charlotte's 25 first with lottery protection, so that's going to be a couple seconds. They have Chicago's 25 first with top 10 protection. We'll see, top 8 in 26 and 27. They have Minnesota's 2031 first. So if you're the Spurs, I think this should probably be where we start before we get into the more general deadline stuff. What is your stance on the timing of your De'Aaron Fox pursuit? If we assume it's mutual interest and not Fox just saying, I would like to play with the tall man, please. Like, what do you think the Spurs, is there an optimal time to pull this off? Can they in fact wait and just friggin' sign him in a couple years because their timeline's that long?
I think we've seen for the most part, if you wait to sign them, you're not going to get them.
Okay.
Like, and if you do wait to sign them and get them, it's Paul George is turning 45 and you were able to get him because his team didn't want him. In terms of optimal timing, I mean, what's difficult is they're in 12th place in the Western Conference. And so this isn't a now move for them. And so is there just wait it out until the offseason? Even if you're going to, maybe he goes somewhere else. And like, if he goes somewhere else, is De'Aaron Fox the type of player you're going to look back and be the Wemby Wimbo is screwed because we didn't get De'Aaron Fox? I don't know. I do think there should be interest because I don't know where you land on this. I don't view them as having a primary floor general of the future on the team. I don't consider Steph Castle in that vein of prospect.
He may be, but it's way too, like, who knows with him, right? Like, he could become a half dozen different types of really good players or none. But yeah, I agree with that for sure.
Would you, if you're the Spurs, like, are you considering making this move mid-season? Because it's not, like, I guess it increases the likelihood you make the play-in in Wemby's year 2. And I think you could also argue if you don't have to give up your own first-round pick this year, because I go back and forth where it's, well, shouldn't you just capitalize on wherever your draft pick lands this year and then make the trade? And then even if you retain it in a De'Aaron Fox trade, it's, well, De'Aaron Fox has kind of compromised the value of that draft pick then. So I'm kind of all over the place with regards to them.
I think it's fascinating because we have in similar cases, and I think I have probably in this one, it's kind of like the Pacers thing with, like, you have Halliburton last year. He's this good now. So the Siakam trade makes sense. Cause like it's not like because Halliburton is early in his career, you're like trying to really time this out till he peaks and you're trying to get guys in that same age. It's like, no. He's this good. You got to start trying to win. Wemby, I think, is deserving of kind of the same treatment where it's like, yeah, sure, he's not in his prime yet, but right now, I mean, he's an all NBA player. And you probably need to, why are you waiting to try to build the best possible team around him? Not to say you should go sign 35-year-olds, but like Fox is in his prime. This makes sense. At the same time, the Spurs have this luxury because of how young Wemby is and because of how just asset rich they are. So where it's like, yeah, Fox would be nice, but in the next 3 years, isn't there a great chance that someone as good or better comes along that like maybe we draft that guy, maybe we trade for him instead, and we're not on the hook for his 3rd NBA contract, which is going to cost a mint. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
I could understand the Spurs. That's why I asked, like, when do you think this should go down if the Spurs are interested? Because I really don't know. I think you can make the case that they should feel significant urgency, and I think you could also make the case that, like, why would they feel any urgency at all? Like, they've got the golden ticket. They've got Wembanyama, who wants to be there, who's only getting better. Like, you can actually afford to be really picky and be like, yeah, Fox is a good fit, but I don't know. Do we like what? Why not wait for the perfect one? Why not wait for someone that's 3 years younger? That, you know what I mean? Like, because they, like OKC or Utah or whatever, that, to use your term, like, they can create a market for someone if they want to, with picks and with contracts and whatever. So I think, just to sort of simplify it, if I'm the Spurs, I'm happy to give up my own future firsts in a package for Fox, and I think, like, I don't know what the number of firsts is going to need to be. That's going to be really interesting, because it's I want to go to one place. Like, so what's that do to the offer? I would also be comfortable waiting until this summer. I think if you think Fox is going to end up there, you don't need to be sort of animated by the faux urgency of February 6th. I think you can just. The Spurs are in the most leveraged position possible, and they, I think, can afford to, like, exploit that if they want to.
I mostly agree with you. I probably would even lean towards I'm not trading for him in the middle of the season. If the cost is Jeremy Sohan salary, one Atlanta first, and then like a Spurs pick and maybe that, but like if it's something that's just so palatable, go ahead and do it. But in all likelihood, if that deal is going to be ultra palatable, it'll be over the offseason when he's 1 year out from free agency, and he's probably applying even more pressure to the Kings after they've just missed the playoffs again. Like that, if I'm the Spurs, that's what I'm doing. But what is interesting and like aligns with what you're saying is I still think they should be looking when you get into other needs. Now, if you think De'Aaron Fox is a remote possibility, maybe you're not looking at, could we get Kobe White from Chicago? Or is there another type of playmaker we could grab? But they should still be looking to upgrade the roster where it comes to like, can we get a front court? Like, because right now it's Wemby, it's Devin Vassell, and then if you want to throw Steph Castle, like saying these guys, like they're the future. Yeah. I don't even know if I'm prepared to say that about Steph. He's early enough, and Spurs fans will push back. They're telling me I'm an idiot. I know that's what they're going to say. I think it's early enough. He's shown enough promise where, no, I'm not looking to move Steph Castle. But if you're talking about in terms of long-term building blocks that, these guys can be a part of the next great iteration of the Spurs, some people might not even say Vassell belongs there. Like, it's Wemby and it's Vassell for me.
I think comparison helps, because they don't have anyone right now who you'd say, like, a young guy that's clearly it seems to be clearly good enough as a second, like Jalen Williams, just because we haven't talked about him in 7 minutes, so I had to bring him up. They don't have a guy that's like a Jalen Williams to Wemby's Shea yet. Like, Vassell is not on that
You're
level.
Talking about big Jalen Williams, right? Not
right, of course. And like Castle is. We lots to like about him. Who knows, right? Like, if he never figures out how to shoot, like, what are we talking about? So and then, like, just with Fox specifically, is he almost like an insufficiently ambitious target for your second best player if you're the Spurs? Like, can you aim higher? Like, because here's what we know about Fox: made an All-Star game, made an All-NBA team, has basically been the best offensive player on a very good offense, but is the best player on a team that has been ultimately, like, pretty disappointing. Like, not all his fault, but it's not like he's how many All-NBA teams would you be prepared to say Fox is definitely making for the balance of his career if the over-under is like 0.5? Like, you might think about the under. He might not be an All-NBA player going forward. Might be, might not. If you're the Spurs, is there some logic in just being like, yeah, that's not good enough. We can do better. We think, like, maybe he's just not the guy for you.
I think what's tough there, viewing it that way, De'Aaron Fox, this is the stage of his career when he becomes available. Like, these players become available. Like, you're not ideally somebody like, they're a little younger, they're not approaching their third contract. The reality is, you never see, and when it happens, it's like, Shea was moved on his rookie deal because no one thought, but one, because of players who were like approaching their third or fourth contracts, but also he was viewed as, there's no way he's a cornerstone. So unless as the Spurs, you think that you're going to draft, that's your plan, to draft your number 2 of the future. I think De'Aaron Fox, like maybe it gets a little better, but like who is the player? Like again, you have to think in terms of like not rookie deals or even on their second contracts. Like, and even something like if you thought it was LaMelo Ball, like okay, maybe, but is he actually better than De'Aaron Fox? Right now, the answer is no. So I think he's good enough, and I especially wonder now. Not that they should set their sights low on purpose for this, but is because he's identified you as his destination. Are you able to have your cake and eat it too, in the sense that, well, we didn't give up all these distance. Like let's say they still have a mini pick and an Atlanta pick after this. If they either need to add or reorient at some point as De'Aaron Fox ages out, that would give you the flexibility to do that too. I just don't, when you're looking at, okay, who's coming down the pipeline, like what would be the better, more plausible fit then?
So yeah, that's the thing. Fox could be your third best player if you're the Spurs. You could absolutely just get him now and go get somebody that's better at some point. I think that's right. I was playing a little bit of devil's advocate. The other thing is though, like, do we think Fox is going to be the last guy that says I want to go play with Wembanyama? Like, there's going to be this will not be the only time this happens. There's going to be other guys that are like, yeah, I'd love to get in there and win a bunch of championships or whatever. Like, it's just, that grass is always going to be really, really green. I think if you're a very good player that's on a team that may not be going where you want it to, you can look over the Spurs and look at all the shit they have, all the picks, all the flexibility. And then Wemby, it's like, well, if I'm trying to win, like, let me get there. So I think Fox is the first to like come out and really do it, but he will not be the last. So that gets yet another feather in the Spurs cap right now, because this will continue. There will be other guys.
So I think overall we're in agreement. Like De'Aaron Fox a good fit. I think he's a better shooter than his numbers. Like if you could shoot 37% consistently on step back threes, which he's kind of done for multiple seasons.
Yeah.
Like and like he's still shooting. His floater hasn't been great, over 54% on floaters. I think he's a good fit. If I'm the Spurs, I'm probably still waiting until the offseason rather than, because I just don't know what the value of adding such a major piece for them. Like also you got to kind of figure out like what's going on with Chris Paul here of it all. Is he going to be happy coming off the bench? I mean, maybe if I'm them, I'd rather look to add elsewhere, like to still try and continue the play and push. And so when you look at this roster, of course, with De'Aaron Fox wanting to go there in the backdrop, like what do you identify as some of their other biggest needs?
Yeah, I think Wemby helps mitigate this if he is the kind of offensive player it looks like he's trending toward, which is to say a spacer. But you do want more shooting, because if you have a Fox Wemby 1-5, I think spreading shooters out around that is like good luck. Like that's just going to be we haven't really seen Fox play with a 5 out like consistently. Like what's that look like? So the more shooting you can put around him there, I think the better everything might look. And just in a vacuum, you want more shooting. Like that's going to be a need either way. If we're just not talking about Fox at all anymore, I think that's where you start. And then after that, it gets complicated, because again, it's just like we're still trying to figure out what kind of team makes sense around Wemby. Like we have some idea of that now, but I don't know. I don't know if I'm looking to make a ton of moves if I'm the Spurs. I'm certainly not like going crazy buy, if it's not Fox. I don't know if you disagree with that.
No, I don't disagree. I still look at them and it's okay. Could you find, because Fox isn't going to check this box. Like what is the future front court partner who is the future front court partner for Wemby? You don't have him on your, like, it's not Harrison Barnes. Julian Champagne's really good, but like you probably want to upgrade from that. Like, or even if it's looking at, do you want to get better backup big than Zach Collins? So I might look in that area. And they also just don't have, because Vassell is small, Castle's a guard. Aside from it, Barnes is aging out, more of a like they don't have wings on this, like a ton of wings on this team. So I might look at, okay, can we upgrade the wing spot without getting crazy? Or can we upgrade the backup big spot, or just get someone else in the front court who can play alongside Wemby? Those are areas that I would look at and see, okay, well, what does it cost to do that? And I wouldn't be afraid of like trading an imminent first with Zach Collins as salary, as an example. Like that's not going to derail. Maybe you want to keep your own first, and you don't necessarily at this point with the Jalen Johnson injury specifically, probably don't want to give up Atlanta's first either. But like you have other, like that Charlotte it's 2 second rounders. Like, so could you do something like that? I would still look at making upgrades in those areas.
Yeah, I think that's fair. This is kind of somewhat germane to the deadline conversation, but do you have a strong opinion on like what kind of 4 or 5, whichever you want to call it, you want next to Wemby now going forward? Like, has his shooting this year, because we know it's like it ain't a Zach Collins type. It doesn't seem to be a Jeremy Sohan type, because why would you, like, just because you can afford a non-shooter at another position doesn't mean you should do that, you know?
And if you're gonna have him, like, he should be able to play the 5.
Yeah, I'm asking because I'm not really sure. I think Wemby just allows you to do whatever you want, but like, do you want like a burly, like, who even is this? Do you want like a burly 4 that could be someone you throw at certain matchups that you don't want Wemby to have to deal with underneath? Like, do you want just another spacer so that both of your front court spots are, or your 4 or 5 spots are playing beyond the 3-point line? Like, I don't know. He affords you opportunities to have all kinds of different players, and that's why I think it's an interesting question.
I think starting along when you're looking at starting or closing alongside him, you probably want, like, what's the better version of Pete Harrison Barnes or Julian Champagny, like, at that 4 spot.
Okay.
But I've thought about them as just in terms of, this is now right by the deadline. Like, what would it cost to take the flyer on Robert Williams III? He could play.
So
with
that's
one.
what's interesting, right? Because
Yeah.
you could do that, because you can have Wemby guard 4s or whatever, or Williams has spent a lot of time guarding 4s or guarding nobody and just like flying around. You can afford to. That's what makes it so interesting. Is like any, there's been a lot of talk about like conventional 5s being available at this deadline, and the Spurs don't need that. It's like, well, they could though. Like, they really could go that route if they wanted to.
If you could do this without having to give up, like, first, like, even Vucevic, if you're sending out Zach Collins' salary, you probably don't. I would bring him off the bench. I wouldn't play him and Wemby together a ton, but you could.
Yep. And you know what? You could play them together, because Wemby is going to mitigate all the defensive issues that Vooch creates
right now too. So that's, you retain 5 out will be super huge apparently.
Yeah, it's just fascinating. So yeah, again, the Fox the Fox thing hangs over everything else we might discuss about the Spurs, but there are like interesting non-Fox angles.
Do you have a preference, by the way, of how they should like go about like a front court partner, like for Wemby?
My inclination is based on what they've tried that I haven't loved, which is Collins, like a spacer that is just kind of not really a spacer, and then Sohan, who's like, well, the defense, we can get away with putting a one-dimensional guy out there, or a limited guy out there, because we have Wemby. I think the only thing I'm sure about is that just because Wemby allows you to have like compromised players at other spots doesn't mean you should. I think you should be greedy and say like, yeah, we want another 5 that can space, because we can get away with it.
I will say, I think maybe the ideal archetype of player, he's been so injured in his career, but to put next to Wemby might be like Jalen Johnson.
Yeah.
Like, not quite like a floor spacer, but good enough to where he is. Maybe you don't want to play him at the 5 a ton. That's fine. But like, he's certainly he's more dynamic offensively than a Jeremy Sohan. Not as good defensively, but like still malleable there. But that feels like the ideal, like he feels more ideal than a Jeremy Sohan type next to Wemby.
Oh yeah. I think that, and I think one of the prerequisites for me would be, you don't have to be like as a Yabusele, like wide as you are tall guy, but I want like heft. I want bulk, but it needs to come with like, yeah, he can space, and yeah, he can move his feet, like that kind of thing. I just want like someone to offset certain matchups where it's like Wemby's it's not ideal for him to be banging with Zubats all the time, or Jokic or whatever.
Aaron Gordon next to Wemby, that'd be a good one.
Perfect. Yeah.
So you wouldn't want to skew. I'm sorry, Spencer, time, but it's fascinating discussion of like not him now, but like the Paul George, the Kawhi Leonard, the Kevin Durant of like, okay, they're like kind of wings, but they're also 4s. Like, you want someone who can slide up to the 5 theoretically.
I think so. Although like the idea of just a bunch of 6'9" guys around Wemby that can do everything is also fun. So I think what we've settled on is like, you kind of have a lot of good ways to go.
And also, now you have a built-in excuse, not because I think people, mostly probably outside of San Antonio, but they want the Spurs to do something aggressive because Wemby's so good. Now you kind of have the built-in excuse of like, they're waiting on the De'Aaron Fox situation, so they couldn't do anything too dramatic.
Right.
And now, I didn't mention this though, because I just thought of it, but when you're talking about other players are going to do it, is there like a rush now? Like, fuck, De'Aaron Fox is trying to get to San Antonio. If Devin Booker's looking at this, is he like, well, actually, like, I want to go to San Antonio. Yeah. So there's like this onrush of players who could be thinking about a trade soon that are then going to do it this offseason because De'Aaron Fox is throwing like the first punch.
And if you're really smart, you're like, well, there's only one more max salary slot there. I got to get that before it gets sopped up. Yeah, there's new urgency to get there. You got to hurry up.
I fave that. That's Spurs interesting as always. Another team that's interesting, The Phoenix Suns, Grant. So they can trade up to 3 first-round picks now. They are $28.2 million into the second apron. They also have, Grant, a 2025 second that they can trade from Denver or Philly. It's the less favorable, but they can send out 4 draft picks now. They are still linked to Jimmy Butler, which will be predicated on moving Bradley Beal, who has no trade clause, and per the latest reporting, would basically be open to any team that is good. And if he's going to a team that's not good, they can't be somewhere cold.
And also just not Memphis. That's
Jimmy Butler. Sorry, he might be okay with Memphis. I don't know why.
Right. Sorry, Beal is the cold weather guy.
With him, there's nothing new on the Jimmy Butler front. I think we're both in the camp of Phoenix is in so deep that if you can get Jimmy Butler and Bradley Beal is going to waive his no trade clause, you just do it, right?
Yeah. Now, I mean, that's where you are.
What's interesting though is let's say they don't get Jimmy Butler. Like, what are the other needs for this team, or like, what are they going to do? And I read something. This is not my idea. I hadn't even thought about it. Sam Vecini over at The Athletic proposed a Yusuf Nurkic for Patrick Williams trade. So it's like Chicago's just getting out from the Williams deal 3 years early. And then Phoenix is taking a chance on, we don't need him to do anything on offense. We're just going to hope that he plays really well on defense. What do you think of something like that? And by the way, they've given up no first-round picks in that scenario, and I would not give up any first-round picks in that scenario.
I mean, I think the first thing I thought was if I'm the Bulls, I'm doing that, which is probably a bad sign for the Suns side of it, just because I think you're just underwater on the Patrick Williams deal, and Nurkic's is fewer years at similar money. I mean, the Suns.
Say, if you're gonna, because you have Nick Richards, who's been great for Phoenix, by the way, I still would argue that they could use an upgrade at the 5.
I agree.
But if your idea is like, well, we kind of want to play small, so like Kevin Durant, like having Patrick Williams on the team just functionally on defense, like that, him and Dunn, like it gives you a lot of optionality.
It does.
I like it for both teams. I'm not going to lie. Now, did I have Patrick Williams number 2 on my big board when he was drafted? Who is to say?
Who remembers things like that? Nobody. I think if we just suspend the idea of Butler and just talk about the Suns as like a regular basketball team, it's pretty clear to me that you're still doing the same things that we wanted them to do over the offseason, which is like, you love a center that you knew could close. You love more size on the wing, so you don't have like Beal needing to guard a real scorer. Like that's not great. Or a point guard, if you're talking about closing lineups that don't have Tyus Jones on the floor, that kind of thing. So it's pretty vanilla. Like it's pretty normal team building stuff. Yep. While the specter of like gross inflexibility and expensiveness and age like hang over. But I don't really know how much we can talk about them independent of the Butler stuff, just because it's kind of like the Fox and Sacramento thing.
How many of these picks, because look, there's a chance just because of how bad it's gotten for Jimmy Butler, I would guess that they're not going to have to send out more than 2 of these first round picks in a Jimmy Butler.
Okay.
Trade. So you're left with a first round pick. Is that enough, assuming it's not this year's first round pick, because we know that's going to be 29 or 30? Like, is that enough to get off the Yusuf Nurkic money while getting back someone who will at least play, even if you're not going to trade Yusuf Nurkic and that 27 first and get Isaiah Stewart. I understand that. But like someone who will at least play for you more than Nurkic is now, which is to say at all.
Let's put a name to it. If you're the Blazers and it's Nurkic and one of those for Robert Williams, I think you're saying no. Or at least, like, I don't know if one is enough. What do you think about that?
Yeah, you probably have to find the right team, which I don't know what the right team would necessarily be.
Well, so what if it's like we're just trying to upgrade the center spot? Even though is that still Nick Richards has been good, but if it's Nurkic and one of those firsts does Mitchell Robinson fit? Does he make less than Nurkic? It's really close, right?
Yeah, he makes way less than Nurkic.
What's Nurkic, like 19, 18?
He's in the 18s. He'll be in the 19s next year.
Yeah, so Robinson's comfortably under that. Is the Knicks aren't doing that? The Knicks aren't taking Nurkic and a bad first for Mitchell Robinson, are they?
No, they're not. I mean, that would be interesting because now you have this. Mitchell Robinson's not playing right now, so now
neither is Yusuf Nurkic.
Yeah, but you have this massive expiring contract to where like, so now you have a first to go out shopping with over the offseason. That's if it was 2, I don't know why you go after Mitchell Robinson, but if it's 2, that's too much for Mitchell Robinson. I mean, Mitchell Robinson's not playing. That's too much for Robert Williams. How many picks would it take for the trade construction to be Nurkic goes back to Portland, you get Tamani Kamara and Robert Williams III? Is that all 3? Is that what it would take?
I mean, it's definitely at least 2. And if it has to be all 3, then I guess Butler is not happening, obviously. That feels like, well, those are shitty firsts though. So like,
let's say they're 27 and 29. Do you still need that third first?
I think maybe because like Kamara is exactly what the Suns I think need, or he's pretty close to it, and they had him and then they didn't. 3. It's so tough. I don't know. Maybe we're wasting time because those 3 firsts. I know it's an oversimplification. I know everybody has said this, but like you're not doing that. You're not splitting up that 1 first into 3 with like Yusuf Nurkic top of mind. Like, right? You're doing that, I hope, because the Heat said we're going to need X for Butler. I think, right? Like, I know that's like a week old kind of way of thinking, but like that just feels like what those are for.
That or maybe are they viewing it through the lens of, and maybe they're not upgrading the center rotation through this, but I think they need wings more than anything else, even with Ryan Dunn and Royce O'Neal there, is it attaching them to Grayson Allen?
Yeah, well, sure. That's the other thing is if this wasn't for Butler, then presumably, yeah, you're going to need 1 or 2 for Nurkic and 1 or 2 for Allen, and that's how you go get your wing upgrades. Maybe I just don't know. I don't know how like. I don't know how this ends without those, at least 2 of those going to Miami for Butler. And then I don't know what one of them gets you attached to your bad salary that you don't want.
I think you could definitely, because I don't view Grayson Allen as, I know he has like years left on his extension. I don't view him as just completely underwater salary. So I think Grayson Allen in a first round pick could probably do something for you.
I think so too. I also kind of like Grayson Allen. I mean, he's not the defender
and on a team where like 3-point volume is not necessarily assured with Phoenix still, even though they were shooting more to start the year, he is really important. But like, and I guess if Bradley Beal is going out, but like if Bradley Beal's still on your team, that probably does somewhat diminish the importance of Grayson Allen.
For sure, yeah. And I think the other thing to think about too is like, if you're a team that is in the market for shooting specialists, like, you can do it cheaper. Like you can go, I don't know if they'd trade him, but like Malik Beasley is someone that's going to cost a lot less. And like, you're not, I don't think Grayson Allen is like atop anybody's list. Good as he's been as a shooter, unbelievable last year as a shooter, just given the cost. I don't know that he's someone you're like really circling in your trade deadline prep.
No, I don't think you could attach, like, what would it take to get Stewart from the Pistons? Especially, I mean, they only have really Duran and Reed as their other bigs, unless you like Clintman. So I don't like that's 2 firsts and Grayson Allen for Isaiah Stewart probably rings a little hollow for Suns.
Yeah, I think it is too. And I also think like Stewart is someone that we talk about because so many teams would want him. But then when it's like, what you flip it around, like, why would Detroit trade him? Like, why? He's really good. Like, I don't understand why they'd be willing to move him for less than like a no-brainer return.
Do you think that they could get Jay Huff or Santi Aldama from Memphis? Now, you're not lopping off salary as part of that unless you're taking back other salary. Like, I don't know what salary like maybe Memphis wants to get rid of Marcus Smart, but I don't know that they're taking on Yusuf Nurkic and how many picks from one of those bigs. And that's too much money coming back. So, but just because Memphis has Edey, Jaren Jackson Jr., Jay Huff, Santi Aldama, Brandon Clark, and Jay Huff is so cheap, he just doesn't play as much. Like Santi Aldama is in most improved and 6 man of the year conversations right now. But how much are they going to pay him? I think I default to the market for bigs and especially restricted free agents isn't that robust. But like those might be names. But again, then you're not, if you're doing that, you're not serving the other purpose of, that's a singular purpose of, we want that big. It's not the dual purpose of, we've also shed money that we don't want.
Right. Yeah. It's tough. I mean, if you had to guess right now, is Jimmy Butler just going to end up in Phoenix before this deadline?
Well, here's my whole thing is I would say yes if you told me that Miami will take on Bradley Beal.
Which it seems like they won't, because they really don't want salary beyond this year, which is like...
Well, now they've opened it up to they want they'll take on salary through next season, but that also doesn't
Okay.
help you with Beal.
Well, and we've talked about this too. The Heat need to make the playoffs.
I mean, Beal probably does help them do that, as opposed to I don't know what else is out there for Butler right now. We didn't do this exercise, so we have to circle back to it. Most likely player to be traded on the Suns. We'll start there. Who you got?
I think even though he makes a lot, I think it's Nurkic.
That was my pick too, because
you want to say Beal, but the no trade clause is just sitting there. Like he can just make it not happen.
And I do not buy. I think he might accept a trade there. I don't understand Milwaukee's interest in him reported at all.
They just don't need that player. You know what I mean? I don't get it.
I might have understood it if it was maybe if they were still getting the 27 and 29 picks, but if it's like I understood it more even when it's like, oh, if they think they're getting Phoenix's 2031, Chris Middleton's better for them if he's healthy than Bradley Beal would be. And I don't know what their defense looks like with both him and Dame there then. So that's why I picked Nurkic too, is because I think at the end, I think you could attach 2 firsts to Nurkic and you're at least getting off that money and then someone who will play for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that.
Who would be your most likely player to be traded for the Kings?
To be consistent, I think I'd have to say Fox because you could say someone like Keon Ellis, which we didn't really even talk about at all. But that's more just I can understand why a lot of teams would be interested in Keon Ellis, like Denver, which we'll talk about. I'll just go Fox, even though I don't know what percentage chance likelihood I'd put on it.
I think it has to be Fox because why are you moving Keon Ellis at this point first of all, why are you moving Keon Ellis on the contract he's on in general? What is the return? And you can't make those decisions. I mean, maybe if you're dead set on Fox is leaving and we're going to rebuild, that's when you capitalize off the peak of Keon Ellis' value. But we know the Kings are going to think that way. Most likely player to be traded for San Antonio.
Is it Barnes?
I think it's Zach Collins.
Okay.
They just have that money to match something. They'll probably have to include some type of sweetener unless they're taking back, because of all that room under the tax. They can take back because it's $16 million. I think they can take back 23 and change in a Zach Collins trade. I don't know who's looking to save money, but you do Zach Collins for Vooch, Torrey Craig, save the Bulls a bunch of money. Maybe that only costs you seconds to get.
I could see that.
Our next team is your team, Mr. Hughes. Take us through the Golden State Warriors.
Here, I got nothing to say. There's nothing interesting happening. So the Warriors are just here. The particulars. They're $6 million into the tax. They're $300,000 into the first apron. They have a 2030 first going to Washington with protection 1 through 20. That'll be a 2030 second if not conveyed. They can still trade if they're in the buying mode up to 3 firsts, which because of some other protections, it can be their 25 or 26 and their 26 or 27 and then 2030, the basically not the protected portion of that. So 21 through 30, that's confusing to read and say of their 2030 first. We have talked a lot about the Warriors and whether they should or shouldn't be looking to make significant additions. It is interesting that as the Butler price has come down, seemingly, it's a little easier to justify. I don't know how far it would have to come down for me to get on board. But what does that mean? Does that mean you're not having, because the outgoing salary for any significant Warriors trade still has to be Andrew Wiggins or Draymond Green. And if it means those guys and some expirings with no firsts or with no Kuminga, is that what the price has come down means? And then in that case, what are we really talking about? It's so in some ways, the Warriors are in a similar position, but as these guys that are available just don't get traded, things change a little bit because maybe the calculus of it's not worth it because they can't get good enough. Maybe that changes a little bit, right? I'm really more trying to talk myself into getting behind some action at some point here.
No, they shouldn't. They're too bad. They missed the window. This should have been done. Not for nothing, but the way that we criticize the Kings for being fake in on Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby, the Warriors did that multiple occasions over the years. And there was also a way to straddle a middle ground, which they did not do. They decided that it has to be an all or nothing proposition, even though they don't have the type of assets that are going to get you an all proposition while there are other teams in the running. Now, the Jimmy Butler stuff, if the price has dropped low enough to I understand Andrew Wiggins has had a good year. If you're not dead set on being like great for Steph's remaining years, if that's the cost of a flyer on Jimmy Butler, you pay it. That is not, I'm sorry. That should just be, maybe you're more likely to catch lightning in a bottle with Jimmy Butler as your number 2 than you are as Andrew Wiggins as what? Your number, he's not even their number 2 offensive option, really.
Unfortunately, sometimes he is, which is the problem. But yeah, no, I can get on board with that. If you're talking ceiling, if you're talking about like, it's not lip service, we are going to do everything within the edge of like being reasonably possible to put the best team on the floor with the highest ceiling next around Steph now and next year, or at least just forget next year. We'll talk about now. Then 100%, like Jimmy Butler gives you a better chance of like, oh my God, they won 2 playoff rounds like that than Andrew Wiggins does. I'm on board with that.
Now, in terms of, and then you would attach additional salaries, and you have to kind of like at that point, if you're trading Andrew Wiggins, does it make Gary Payton II more important, and you're gaming it? So, do we have any updates on the Schroeder injury? I saw he left the court.
I haven't seen any.
I am probably, if you're getting Jimmy Butler, trying to include his salary in that deal, though. So this trade happens on February 5th or 6th. I want to ask you, are you willing to include anything additional? And I'll tell you where my stance is because it might surprise you. Because the Warriors are so bad, are so not great.
So mediocre.
Yeah, they're mediocre. I'm not including much. Now, if you told me it was a protected 2025 first-round pick that immediately turns into something else, done.
Yeah.
What I find more interesting is, what if it's not the pick? What if it's Jonathan Kuminga?
I think that gets harder because doesn't it feel to you like the fact that he hasn't been, I mean, he's been hurt. So it's kind of like taken a lot of the discussion, off the table. The fact that he's still on the team and you haven't heard any rumblings at all is like, I think maybe they're just going to re-sign him. Like, or they're, let him go to restricted free agency and match something. That's more likely now. I think well, if it's between, would you, as a sweetener, even though it's not the right term exactly, include Kuminga or that protected 25 first you're talking about? I'm giving up the first way before I'm giving up Kuminga. I don't know if I'm doing both though. Like a 25 first and Kuminga. I meant
as if that's the alternative, because I think I look at it through this is the Warrior stance has puzzled me because they're so concerned about not mortgaging their future, which would make sense if they had the post-Steph building block already in place.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot sell me on Jonathan Kuminga being that player. And so now I'm looking at it as, okay, you get to keep your imminent first-round picks. Those are going to be mediocre. They're probably not going to turn into building blocks. What you're really saying is rather hoping we get lucky in kind of the post-lottery or late lottery, which again is fine, or we're just really not going to start thinking about the future until Steph is gone or wants out or is really declining. Again, also fine. But like if that's your stance, I think that makes Jonathan Kuminga more expendable. And so because of what he's going to cost in his next deal for the duration of the Steph window, I would rather pay Jimmy Butler than Jonathan Kuminga, maybe because it's shorter term. Now, if you're telling me it's, if the terms are a protected 2025 first round pick that immediately turns into something else or Kuminga, there's not a choice. It's the pick.
Mm-hmm.
But if the Heat are only willing to do the deal, or if you can only get the deal done, because Kuminga is also valuable as like an actual salary piece, because Andrew Wiggins isn't making a ton relative to Jimmy Butler. So I would be open to moving Kuminga or that pick if I'm the Warriors, because of where I'm at now. This would have been a different conversation had they followed my lead, which they should have. Let's all just agree. I would give up one or the other, but I wouldn't give up both. And that's as deep. It's Wiggins, one of those two assets, other salaries. That's as deep as into that. This is short of Giannis Antetokounmpo demanding a trade and only wanting the Warriors or something.
Mm-hmm.
That's as deep as into the buyer as well that I'm going, looking at my asset stash if I'm Golden State.
Now, are you thinking this way with the idea being that Butler is on the team beyond this season? Or is it just, if all I know I'm getting is this half season rental? Or does, because you're talking about like comparing having to pay Butler beyond this year versus Kuminga beyond this year. Like I would need to be, I don't know. I'm not comfortable with either of those propositions really, but like I would need, you got to know that Butler's staying, right? And I don't know how you can know that for sure. Given, I mean, like
that's intel. If he's thinking about leaving, then you just don't trade.
Yeah,
for him would be my stance. And by the way, anything I do if I'm the Warriors at this point, like I'm ducking the tax. Like you figure out how
yeah,
to
that's
get,
another thing, which is
but
easy
like
though,
just
right? Because you've got all this expiring salary, you can just send out. If that's all this deadline amounts to, that's probably disappointing. But like, if you're talking about most likely scenarios, just like dumping GP2 or Looney somewhere to duck the taxes, like that's probably pretty high on the likelihood scale.
and you can even while taking on Jimmy Butler's money, like there's a way for you to figure out to do it as well. I'm still probably doing that just to like, okay, like this because even if you get Jimmy Butler, I think that maybe spurs a play-in push and you get to the playoffs. I'm very curious. This is all to say of how low the Jimmy Butler asking price has dropped
Right.
because it didn't seem like it was super high to begin with, or at least
Mhm.
they weren't going to get much to begin with. So, most likely player to be traded here.
I will say Gary Payton II.
Like,
I think you could make a case for Looney, Kyle Anderson, Buddy Hield. I feel like he's the most like they could. I mean, Looney. It's close. It could be Looney, but I'll go GP2.
I think GP2 is the right answer, especially if you think Andrew Wiggins is still going to be. I think just Gary Payton is like basically a wing for you,
Well,
like
yeah,
defensively. And as of right now, you don't necessarily need that with Moody and Wiggins. And if you think Kuminga is going to be healthy, if I will say, if I could move Kyle Anderson without having to include a sweetener, I would absolutely do it.
he would be my
Contract
number
with
one
them does not
choice.
age too
Yeah,
well.
and he's got 2 more years after this
Yeah.
one. Pretty low number, but it's just like I don't. I think he's just not someone you need on
That's
this
someone
roster.
that might become valuable. Like if you can also, that might be part of the value for them. Like, oh, you get off of him in a Jimmy Butler trade too. Like
Maybe.
that
Yeah.
helps them a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else on them? Do you think the most likely outcome to me would be that they try to duck the tax?
Yeah, and then we didn't really talk about the Vucevic of it all, but like I keep seeing that 25 first going out for Vucevic.
Nope.
I'm like, no way, man. It's going to need
If
to be
you
seconds or nothing.
if it's top 25 protected and then turns into something else, sure, go
Okay.
right ahead, Chicago. If you want the optics of we got a first round,
Right?
pick
We
for
got
Vooch.
you got to want to be able to say you got it first.
After the Golden State Warriors, we are on to a team that I thought was going to be less active, but the Derek Lively injury, on top of the Maxi Kleber injury, on top of Daniel Gafford was dealing with, Dwight Powell, excuse me, dealing with some hip stuff. The Mavericks are pretty banged up in the front court, but let's get to their vitals. $5.2 million into there's a blank on the screen, but it's the tax. 2027 first round pick owed to Charlotte, top 2 protected. Then it becomes Miami's 28 second. They have their 2028 first round pick going to OKC as part of a swap. Their 2029 first round pick will head to Houston or Brooklyn, and their 2030 first round pick will head to San Antonio. Can head to San Antonio as part of a swap. Basically, they can still trade a 2025 first, a 2026 swap, and their 2031 first if they're looking to do something spicy. I am a big believer, Grant, that this team is just way better than its record shows because they've been so banged up. But if you're the Mavericks, how are you approaching this trade deadline?
Yeah, so that I agree with you, and that informs my my thoughts because the most glaring immediate need is a big because your starters out. Gafford is fine, but not someone that you can play 37 minutes a night. Kleba is injured. I don't know if you mentioned that. And Powell is, even if he's healthy, is like really just like an adult in the locker room kind of thing. So like knowing that, I still think I would rather go try to find another PJ Washington type because I'm assuming that as long as they get in, they'll have Lively back, hopefully, for the playoffs. And like, then you're okay there. The bigger need is, I think you can never have too many of them, but the bigger need, I think, is just another guy that's going to make open threes and guard. So that's risky because what if Lively's not healthy and you didn't go get another big and you just head into the playoffs with like one serviceable center? That I'm just gambling a little bit and saying I'd rather get another wing for, just because you're always going to need those guys on this particular team.
I think I would agree with you. I'm wondering if they could still use a different kind of big just because if it's PJ Gafford and you're assuming Lively's healthy, I guess that's enough. But like at this point, it's okay with the injuries that Lively's dealt with. And we know like you just can't really count on Kleba anymore from a health perspective. The two names I thought of kind of that would fulfill the quota that you were talking about. What would it take to get Chris Boucher and Agbaji from Toronto? Because you can match the money pretty easily.
I think if you're getting both, I think you're probably got to give up one of those firsts, don't you think?
Yeah, I think that's fair. But you could protect this year's first just against disaster, just because of all the injuries,
Yeah.
I might do it. Like if Kleba is the outgoing salary too, and then you figure out like who do you want the other salary to be as part of that. I mean, Omax is kind of like a lottery ticket at this point. So I don't think I'm including him in that deal unless it's you could do it with like seconds and no first. Like then sure, we could talk about Omax. But is it if it's Kleba and Dwight Powell for Boucher and or Kleba and Dante Exum? Maybe Mavs fans want to keep him around for when he
Yeah.
gets
Forgot
healthy.
about Exum.
But if it's like one of those two guys or Markieff Morris, I think would get you there because what's Kleba at? He's 11.
He was 11.
And so Markieff Morris is like
2.
13. So that gets you to 13. So that would come close. I think that might actually make it work with Toronto because what does Akbaji make? He's at 4. Boucher's at 10.8. So that's 14.8. So it might need to be the but they are under the first apron as of right now. Where's their wiggle room?
You can rope it. That's close enough to where, we'll rope a third team in with some fake second going somewhere if you needed to really make it happen. I think a 25 first that is pretty. I mean, that's the thing with Dallas is like that might be an okay first.
I think is fair. Sorry, I was going to say lotto protected, and then
and then what? I mean,
and it has to turn into seconds because you have that 27 first going to Charlotte. But your betting is Toronto that it would convey. They might say we don't want a first. We'd rather have Akbaji. But like this is third year. They kind of think about his next contract, and he's someone like he's been pretty good this year. That's why I don't know if Mavs fans have like paid attention to him, but having him and Boucher, who is on like Boucher's been shooting like 50-something% from three over his last 15 or 16 games.
Yeah.
The types of shots he's going to be getting, like when the Mavs are fully healthy. He's my siren song though. So maybe is that trade egregious? Like, are you not? But
no. I think that makes sense.
You got off of Kleba's money in that.
Right. I think if anybody's maybe the way to look at it is this. I think if anybody's hesitating on that, it's Toronto. So by definition, that means it's probably a pretty good deal for the Mavs, but not out of the realm of possibility at all.
Now, if they're thinking smaller and they say, you know what, because we have Quentin Grimes and Klay Thompson and Najee Marshall, like, are we really how much is Akbaji going to play? How much are we going to need that type of wing help? I think getting a Chris Boucher, like in a vacuum, should just be like, if you're giving up Kleba as the matching salary, even with that year left on his deal, I don't think that should cost you first round equity to get like off, right? You could probably get seconds in Kleba for Boucher.
Yeah. So I think, is there any way they manage all this and also duck the tax? That gets pretty tough.
It would. So, I mean, when you look at like, if they need to shed $6 million in salary, basically, and you're bringing back what, let's say 15 as part of Boucher and Akbaji, if it's Boucher, I feel like it'd be pretty easy to get there. It's like, we'll include another contract going to Toronto that's expiring, and then just between Markieff Morris being on his minimum, I don't think it's impossible, but how do you get to $21 million as Dallas? It would have to, so Powell and Kleba get you to 15. And then if you're Markieff Morris, that's another 2. I don't think you could get, like if you did, you'd be like, okay, is Dante Exum, is he just getting out of here as well? It'd be tight to duck the tax and get Akbaji and Boucher. You could certainly get Akbaji and duck the tax. He's so cheap. But I think you could probably do one or the other and realistically duck the tax. If you're them, is that, with Kyrie hitting free agency, with Luka's next deal coming up, is that something you're making a priority?
Yeah, probably. It can't be that high a priority. I was thinking if you can turn Kleba into someone that makes like 4 or 5 million and you incentivize that with a second or something like that, I just don't know. Like, how it doesn't feel smart to be prioritizing. Let's get under the tax, and I mean, because it's Kleba, it's like, well, he's not going to be an integral piece of the rotation. So maybe there's some logic there. It doesn't feel like the type of move a team that made the finals and like we both agree could maybe get there again.
I guess
be making.
If you're going to end up doing nothing and it's, we need to get rid of Dwight Powell and Markieff Morris and we duck the tax that way.
Yeah,
that's probably fine.
Yeah.
Or do you think that this team, do you think that they have the ability to do nothing because of what we really think that they could be if everybody's healthy?
Do they have the ability to do that?
Like would you be, if you're a Mavs fan, or if you're just like, do you want this team to do something to address one or two of the needs that we sort of outlaid? Or do you think that because of the conceptual depth that they have at full strength, Because look, there were some just neither of the players we mentioned is going to help this. But like they lost, they were winning the Luka Doncic minutes. He goes down. They've now lost the non-Luka Doncic minutes, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Different type of sample size because you're going up against like opposing teams' best units a lot without him. But do you think that they're talented enough to say like we're just going to sit tight and hope we get healthy?
I think you have to say that. I think you have to have that as an option because because of what they did last year and because of how good they have looked in short bursts when Luka was like looking fit and like healthy and they had a relatively full rotation. This is one of those situations where like we have to talk about potential ideas for all these teams. And then we always gloss over the whole, like, doing nothing is an option. And maybe we're not giving that enough credence with this team in particular.
I still think I don't think they're going to do nothing. So I think if they end up not being like buyers, they're going to try to duck the tax. So I don't think they'll end up doing nothing. I would like to see them. Could they do seconds in Cleveland, get another big in there? I mean, if it gets you a wing, I'm just assuming it won't. That's why I'm not mentioning that. But like the Boucher deal to me makes a lot of sense. For them.
I like that one.
We go to the Denver Nuggets. They are $11.7 million into the tax, $5.7 million into the first apron. I'm not going to go, if you're watching on YouTube, I have all their picks that are owed moving forward on the screen. They can still trade their 2031 first rounder, just has to be conditional upon their 25, 27, and 29 first rounders conveying to Orlando, OKC, and OKC in that order. They also have 3 swaps to trade. Not nothing when you're looking at the out years of 28 and 30. Of course, 2026, probably worthless unless it's going to the Thunder. Might consider like exercising that swap. Grant, what are you looking at? Like, what do you view as this team's biggest need entering the deadline?
I mean, let's hit the checklist. Like, one is, can you turn, I don't know if it's a need. Can you make Zeke Naji become someone that you're going to play and have some value in your rotation? Another big behind Jokic, even though, as we talk about fairly often, like Aaron Gordon will probably play a backup center quite a bit.
When it matters in that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like it's still, I think it's still just, if we're talking about needs, that's a need. You don't have a capable backup big for Jokic. Just another, this is the first time we've said 3-and-D wing so far. That's a record if that's
I think
true.
Didn't we just say it for Dallas?
Probably. Probably might have used a different descriptor. Like they need I probably did actually say 3-and-D wing. I don't know if you have any other glaring needs. Like it's the story with Denver is the inflexibility and the difficulty of pulling anything off given their lack of assets and apron induced issues. So like, I don't know if you have another need to talk about. I'm all ears, but then like maybe we really do just need to talk about like what's actually possible, like what the constraints are, because that is the story for them.
I do think what's interesting is that they've been playing in like a vacuum so much better than they kind of were at the start of the season. I think that even more than a 3-and-D wing, I'd probably lean into offensive versatility and be like, is there a better version of what Julian Strother's kind of doing right now? Like they need a caps lock shooter aside from Michael Porter Jr. Mm-hmm. Julian Strother's been playing better. Do you trust him in the playoffs? And so I would couch it with caps lock shooter who would crack your postseason rotation without hesitation. Because I think you get enough of like, they're not really have the 3, but like you don't want to skew too far towards defense when you have Brown and Peyton Watson and even Gordon in there. But what can they do? At this point, it's just, first of all, they're limited. In, like, we know Jokic isn't going anywhere. Jamal Murray and Aaron Gordon are trade ineligible. Mm-hmm. I know people floated around Michael Porter Jr. trades, but like, I just said I want them to get a caps lock shooter. So you're going to trade your only caps lock shooter and then get who? I think it's what I would be trying to do. And like, let me know if you agree or if you just think it's like, ride this out. I'm trying to see like, all right, what can these swaps, can they get us off of Dario Saric and or Zeke Naji for someone who would play where it's, how many swaps would you give to Charlotte to get Cody Martin for Zeke Naji?
That's such a low level move.
Notable about this team, unless they do something different, they have 0 second-round picks to trade right now, which is also what makes their situation so difficult.
That's the thing. So any swap feels like too much, but if that's what you got, that's what you. I was thinking. I guess I do one. I wouldn't go more than one if I'm trying to get a player like Cody Martin, but like. You could do say, let's just involve the Pistons because we have to because of the cap space, like Saric and Naji for like in a swap for Simone Fontecchio or something like that. Like I don't.
So That's interesting. So you would need 2 swaps for that, by the
You
way.
think?
You would
'Cause
have to go
you're dumping
27
2
and
unwanted
29
salaries.
because 26 doesn't, 28 and 30 because I don't think 20. I mean, Detroit's pretty good, but they're not going to think. So you would have to go 28 and 20-30 swaps with Saric and Najee for Simone Fontecchio. I would probably. It's tough because is Simone Fontecchio closing games for
Probably
them?
not.
No,
But
but he's
neither are those
playing
other
for
2
them.
guys.
Uh, if you could do one swap with Zeke Najee for Cody Martin, I would do that for sure. Now,
Mhm.
I'm assuming any of the swaps is just like, unless you're including all 3, like it's not 2026. Like teams are not gonna. Maybe it's for the optics. Oh, Charlotte got 26 and 28 swaps from
Mhm.
Denver, like for the optics of it.
Do you think it's likely they do that? They're
No,
talking from Denver's
I don't think
perspective.
Denver would do it. I'm
I
asking
don't
if
think
you
so
think
either.
they should do something like that.
Yeah, I kind of don't, as glaring as it is that you got to do something with Najee to turn him into a player. Like any kind of first round, it just doesn't it feel like insane to be using a especially when you have so few, like a first round asset to hopefully get someone that might play 10 minutes instead of 0. Like that's such a desperate thing to
Yeah,
me. I don't
I
know.
I get that, but I'm like, yeah, and Cody Martin doesn't really fulfill any of the needs that we outlay. I think he'd be useful for them, like the defense and like
He would
sometimes he'll
play.
hit threes. But yeah, that's a great for Simone Fontecchio is interesting though, because he's more of his percentages down, but he's more of the caps lock shooter and has the size to do well on defense. I don't necessarily know why Detroit would do that unless they're just like, well, we're not making a buy move. Simone Fontecchio hasn't played necessarily a ton this year, but like with Tim Hardaway Jr. on an expiring deal,
Mhm.
like he becomes important. I would absolutely give up 2 swaps to get Simone Fontecchio, though.
And the other thing too is like, unless as another team you think it's likely that Jokic leaves, like Denver's picks are still gonna like what are the odds you exercise that swap?
What if you're not giving up a player and Denver's like, we're going to duck the tax and Zeke Najee, Dario Saric, 2 swaps just into Detroit's cap space?
Just yeah. Oh man, what a tough. You can't do that if you're Denver. You can't do that.
All right, you get a 2nd round pick back.
I still don't. I'm so uncomfortable using a first round asset to do something so seemingly small time. But I mean, they are where they are. They've got the assets they've got. Like if you're trying to improve the team, you just got to use what you have. But I'm wildly uncomfortable with that.
The other thing they could do, we haven't mentioned it, is we've talked a lot about, like they already didn't pay KCP. They're not paying all of the youngsters. Like you're not paying Brown, Watson, and Strother, and then also keeping Aaron Gordon, Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., Nikola Jokic. So if you actually wanted to do something, is there one, who would be the youngster that you would trade? And I really think we have to make this a tougher decision because the answer is Julian Strother. But if you're looking to really sweeten a package, would you prefer as the Nuggets to move Peyton Watson or Brown as the attachment to like the money deal, which is Saric and Zeke Najee?
Man, Brown is just more helpful now. I could still imagine a team saying, Watson's the one we want. Like, so if you want to get this done, Nuggets, like Watson, with whatever you think his ceiling is, like he needs to be the guy. So I guess if I'm Denver, I guess I'm more willing to make Watson the guy I'm trading. I don't feel great about either one of them because they're just so short on players you could even like squint and see.
It might also depend on who's coming back. Like if it was for a trade for Denny Avia, I think you probably feel more comfortable giving up Watson in that scenario just because of
because similar positions, like you're addressing the depth issue. Yeah. Do you think it's Watson like in a vacuum? Are you more comfortable trading Watson than Brown?
Brown is the better player. I think Peyton Watson still has the higher ceiling.
That's what I think.
And I think just because he has another cost-controlled year, I might actually be more comfortable trading Brown. It would really just depend on the return. It's okay if you're getting someone who could actually maybe close for you, then it like what if that there's no way for them to get to them. I was gonna say, what if that got them Cam Johnson, but there's no way for them to get to the $23 million.
Can't get there.
Ridiculous. So that's the other thing is like I don't have the name for them. Like we threw out names, but like none of them are no brainers for me.
Yeah. So most likely player to be traded?
I'm gonna say Dario Saric, just because Vlacho Canchar has an implicit no trade, so I can't. And he's Jokic's homie, so I'm gonna say no. Or is it just Jalen Pickett trying to wipe some salary off the ledger?
I think it's probably Saric. I mean, you want to say it would be easier to say Najee if, well, actually, if you move Saric, that does not get you under the first apron because it's a difference of about $1 million, 4.7 million in salary for Saric, and they're about 5.7 over. So, like, functionally, you should be trying to move Najee's 8.8 because then that theoretically opens up other moves for you, I
That
guess.
deal goes. I think you would have to hope. Can you do something like Pickett, Saric, and
Yeah.
then I think you can give up the. I know the optics are terrible, but if you gave like a 2026 swap to, like, what team is doing, like if it's Detroit that decided to, just as an example, or it's a team that can take Saric into like an exception, like I think you could justify doing something like that. But I don't even like if you attach Pickett or even Hunter Tyson to Dario Saric, I don't know what team is gonna be like, yeah, we'll do that.
Who's the last guy making as relatively little as Zeke Naji that has seemed less tradable? You know what I mean? It's like it's $8.8 million, and it's like, oh, he's toxic. No one wants it.
It was fascinating because those deals don't technically age that poorly, but like they signed him to that before they were ever playing him, and then they just proceeded to never consistently play him, even though they were there was like at least two consecutive off seasons where like everyone like Zeke Naji's ready.
Here he comes.
Like he's coming. And I even thought the deal was fine when they signed it.
Oh, yeah.
So like I'm not going to say that I was out in front of this, but yeah, that's the challenge there for them. So who did we settle on as most likely to be traded? Saric?
I'm going to say Saric. It just seems like Najee is inexplicably like just untradeable.
I'm going to go just for variety's sake, Jalen Pickett, because also the optics, because they're going to have to include something to get off Saric to then have to give up, like, grease the wheels of another salary jump of a player you just signed because you gave him a player option. Is just Calvin Booth isn't coming back from that. I don't think.
Oh boy.
Our next team, I feel like they should be quick.
Yeah, I think so. So the Houston Rockets, they're 10.6 million under the tax. They can trade up to 4 first rounders. Notably, we can just go through it quickly. They have a 2025. They can swap their 25 for the Thunders if they want to, or Phoenix. They have a 2027 swap available as well with Brooklyn. They have the Suns 27 first outright. They have the more favorable 2029 first of Dallas or Phoenix. Also have the option to swap that pick for the less favorable. It's just like they got a million picks. That's the takeaway here. The Rockets have said they're not interested in making a big swing. Raphael Stone said that a couple months ago. It has just been reiterated. I think Tim McMahon reported a couple days ago of ESPN that like he's asked around and GMs are just like, no, yeah, they're serious. The Rockets really aren't. It's not a joke. They really are just going to hang on and see what this core matures into. So if we take that at face value, then it's like, you know, their needs are what they are. We've talked about their offense quite a bit. We can get into more depth there, but then you're just really what you're talking about are like the Jock Landales of the world and like the Jeff Greens and Jay Sean Tates. Like, what do you maybe turn those guys into if a swap is not, or I mean, if a big trade is not on the table? So, one, are you on board / do you buy the, we're not going to do anything crazy? And two, whatever you think about that, what should they be targeting if they're going to do anything at all?
So I buy that they're not going to do it. They're number 2 in the West. Like,
do you think that's the right decision? I kind of do, but
just recalibrate over the offseason. You're going to open up more moves that way because Jalen Green and Alperen Şengün, not saying they're going to trade either of them, but their salaries are more movable. Mm-hmm. And you're also at that point, it's okay with like Tari Eason, Jabari Smith Jr. extension eligible. You have Amen Thompson and Cam Whitmore coming in the rear view. You're better equipped to make more decisions. There's the Fred VanVleet team option at that point. So I think waiting is the right call, but they're also, because they're so far under the tax and just with the new trade matching rules benefit teams that are under the tax, where it's just like, if you're sending out and they can do this, a $7.5 million salary or it's cheaper, they can take back more than twice as much in that. That might have value where a team just, if they're looking to cut money, and if they're going to do that, they're not going to get like a down the stretch offensive option. But like a shooter who maybe cracks the rotation more than Reed Shepherd has this year. Is that
unrealistic? They play at all?
Right. And like you have the Jock Landale money non-guaranteed into next year. You have Jeff Green and you have Jay Sean Tate as expiring salary. It's like you can do a bunch of different things. And like even in Jeff Green, so he's making more than $7.5 million. What is Jeff Green at now? He's at like is he
9.6? So
9.6 as an example. They can take back that plus $7.5 million. On top. It's like now you're talking about a $17 million player. I'm I'm not sitting here saying, oh, I know which team is going to give up that. But like, if Miami is like kind of retinkering, like you get Duncan Robinson for giving up basically nothing and maybe seconds. And then you have a salary that you can then roll into next year to trade if you wanted to.
This is a Cam Johnson team if they want to be. Easy. Like you can offer exclusively expiring salary and picks if you want to do that.
You're okay with them giving. I do agree that might be the one where it's like, okay, he's so plug and play. You might like he's not taking the ball away from anybody, but to give up it's going to cost you 2 first-round picks.
Right. I mean, I'm saying if the Rockets want to do that, like easy, like no problem. I don't know if they should, but it's just like that. That's what well, would you call that like a big swing? I don't think so. I think that's more of like a Booker.
I think giving up 2 first-round picks counts as at least a medium-sized swing.
Okay. It's not a check swing. It's actually going to be a straight. Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, you said it already. This team is second in the West, and like things seem like Amen Thompson is playing incredibly well. It was so good the other night, and has just been consistently really good. Like you still, the targets are still like, how do we make the half court offense better? Because their overall offense is fine. It's just it's offensive rebounds and transition and free throws and stuff. Those are the targets. I don't even know how urgent that stuff is because you're so good at everything else, you know?
And it's also, you want to win a playoff series, but the whole point is like, you almost want to see yourself as you are going to the playoffs and what it looks like, and then make decisions from there.
Yeah. You want to win this. You're right. You want to win the series, but like also valuable is finding out why you lost. And then you can make all the offseason stuff you're talking about make more sense.
To be fair, I do think this will be an Orlando Magic situation where they lose exactly as we think they're going to lose. And then it's like, well, couldn't they just trade it for like another shooter type and see what happened there?
Which, okay. Like we think that, but at least we'll know, you know? And again, they're so just the year over year, I guess it's 2+ years now. The leaps have just been, they're ahead of schedule. Like they can afford to be patient like this.
Yeah. So maybe they take a miniature swing, but I don't think they have to. And I probably would take the miniature swing just for like a shooter, but they're not in a position where they have to do that.
Yeah. Most likely player to be traded real quick before we get to the
Clippers. Man. So is it wrong? I normally would have said Jock Landale, but is it wrong to say Jayshawn Tate just because the benefit of Jock Landale would be you could just guarantee his salary to use as part of a trade next year? So I'm going to go with Jayshawn Tate, even though he provides more on-court value than a Landale or even a Jeff Green.
I think I was going to rule out Landale for that reason, is you can like Evan Fournier him and just be like, guess what? You're still here.
Get paid.
Yeah, exactly. Good for you. I'll just to be different, I'll just say Jeff Green, even though I think they probably value his like, leadership and stuff. Yeah.
It'd be funny that they're going to trade Jock Landale. We're both wrong. That'll be a great look.
Wouldn't be the first time.
The Los Angeles Clippers. So they have $2.5 million into the tax. My prediction before we get into anything is that they will not be paying the tax this year. And if they do, I don't know whether that's dumb or if Steve Clifford just really Steve Clifford. Oh my God. Steve Ballmer just really doesn't give a shit, which I kind of respect, but they should probably duck the tax. They can trade. They can trade their 20 or 2031 first, and they can then trade, depending on what they're doing with that, the 2030 or 2031 swap. I guess if they wanted to, they could just trade 2 swaps. I don't know. That'd be a weird trade. And then they have seconds. They have a 2030 second. It's the less favorable of their own and Utah's, and then a 2031 second. Biggest need for me, Curtis, you agree? Like, let's get someone else in there who could generate and make shots.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think, the offense has not been the strength of this team. It's like, I guess I would say it's impressive that Harden has been able to do what he's done, even though like objectively Harden has had an inefficient season and all that stuff. It's just the lift is super heavy. I think it's that. If it's not that, it's a different kind of center behind Ivica Zubac. I think then we get into the Olynyk and Boucher type spacers. I think would be the other thing you want to look at as the Clippers.
Is there any I'm trying to think of, because finding what they need, because it doesn't have to be a big name, because you do have Kawhi, if you trust that he's going to be healthy, James Harden, the stuff Norman Powell has done this year. It could be like just someone who's better than Bones Highland / Kevin Porter Jr. minutes that you've seen this season. I don't know what names necessarily spring to mind there without maybe taking like bigger swings.
Yeah, because go ahead. I was gonna say you're inclined to want to use the Tucker salary on kind of anything that you're gonna do, because after that it's like, are they gonna trade Terrence Mann? Like they seem to really just never be willing to do that. I don't know. The first I was like, Jordan Clarkson level player. Like, well, I think that's maybe out of your price range, right? Like, or more than you want to pay, especially if you're trying to deduct that tax, which is just that 2.5 million makes a difference if you're dealing with PJ Tucker's 11 million going out.
Honestly, I think if it came down to it, you could just say Bones Highland and that 20-30 second, less favorable second. That'll duck the tax if a team just takes him.
Yeah.
I think you could do that. I was wondering, would you do Terrence Mann and PJ Tucker for Lonzo Ball? That doesn't, I don't think it quite gets you out of the tax because Lonzo Ball's Lonzo Ball might make more than the two of them combined. Hold, please. Let me check. Because I keep thinking he's at 20, but isn't he actually at like 22 and a half?
I had 20, like 20.5 in my head, but that's probably wrong.
Well, either way, so they make about 23 million combined, Mann and Tucker, or like 22.9, and Lonzo Ball is 21.4. So you don't duck the tax, but like you do shed money.
Yeah, you can still do the Bones for whatever trade too if you want to get under the tax, like you say.
The argument against doing that would be how many minutes is Lonzo Ball going to play, but also do you want someone who's more of like a half court like shot generator rather than getting you like organized in transition or just pushing the ball and throwing hit heads?
I'm not going to lie. I kind of love that. I mean, you would do that, I think, with an eye towards obviously re-signing Lonzo. He's definitely not the like point of attack initiator that we're talking about, but he is like a really great version of the next best thing, health being assumed and all that. Because like he will just make the next pass, and that's got real value in a half court set. Even though, like you're right, his value is as like the guy making hit aheads and the guy transition stuff. But I just don't think Tucker obviously is like is dead money to you as the Clippers, and then I think Ball gives you more of what you need than Mann does. Even if Mann is obviously the better health bet, all that stuff.
Having Lonzo Ball and Kawhi Leonard on the same team is a lot of like lower body degeneration.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just so happy that Ball is like actually playing, and I want him to be somewhere that he helps. That like he matters.
I wondered too if there was like a PJ Tucker for Cody Martin type deal, like PJ Tucker in a second for Cody Martin, because he can do some initiation.
Mm-hmm.
And you're ducking the tax in that scenario too. I think just barely, but you are ducking it.
Yeah. I mean, I guess then the question is, well, we could just jump. PJ Tucker is the most likely player to be traded because he's got a big enough number and they have zero use for him as an actual basketball player. What are you needing? Their assets are limited. Like, is Tucker, and you can't, I don't know who the guy is you're giving up with Tucker to justify a first, or getting back for Tucker to justify a first. So like, is Tucker in a second? What are we talking about?
Like, I think if you were like, well, in terms of return, at that point, it might be like Cody Martin, I think would be this, like Tucker in a 20-31 second. Cody Martin's probably, and Charlotte might say, well, we'd rather just have Cody Martin. Like, Tucker's expiring, so he's innocuous, but he's almost more, like it would almost makes more sense as part of a larger deal where like teams might just have a ton of interest in Terrence Mann.
Okay.
His role is just going to be a little bit, he's going to fluctuate, I think, forever with the Clippers, depending on who's available.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Tucker on his own is, I don't know. Yeah, I think you're right. The more we talk about it, it's going to have to be Tucker and Mann if you're really doing anything. And do the Clippers,
or you're getting somebody who has money, which Cody Martin does, but it's non-guaranteed. But you're getting someone who has guaranteed money that the other team either doesn't want or would just be okay getting rid of for seconds. Because you're not, I don't know that you could, if there's a name out there that would inspire me as the Clippers to give up a first, like a realistic, like if Kobe White, and you're going to give up like one of your out year first plus, I mean, Tucker and Mann, and then like someone else going back. I think does Mann work straight up for him? It doesn't, regardless, like maybe something like that would get you there, but there's no, Kobe White's at 12. So it'd have to be like Mann and salary X plus a first for Kobe White, or it'd have to be Tucker and salary X plus a first for Kobe White. And that would be somewhat intriguing, but I don't even know if I don't know if the Bulls would do that. Mm-hmm. If it was Mann in the first, I'm not going to lie, as the Bulls, I'd probably consider it like as a 2030 or 2031 first. But I kind of don't think the Clippers would do it.
Can we just talk about how impressive it is that we're framing everything about the Clippers as them being buyers, coming from where they came from to start the year? That's fun.
I will say, to that end, it'll be hard to address what we think is their biggest need. And so I really do think it'd be realistic to Tucker, one or two of those seconds. And like, why wouldn't Toronto give you Chris Boucher?
Yeah.
at this point.
Yeah.
So like something like along those lines would be good for them. How about the other Los Angeles team, Grant? You ready to take us through them?
I'll do it. So the Lakers are 14.6 million into the tax, 3.5 million below the second apron. They have a 2025 first headed to Atlanta, a 27 first to Utah with top 4 protections. That becomes a 27 second. They are able to trade their 29 and 31 firsts and swaps in the even years, 26, 28, and 30, as well as their own 2025 second and the Clippers 2025 second. So not exactly asset poor. Not really in position to make like the best offer for whoever they might want to go after, but certainly capable of making some additions. I think so. Anthony Davis would say their biggest need is a center, so he doesn't have to play center.
Wait, can we
I think
talk about how funny that was? So
can we talk about how stupid that is? Like you just can't. The Lakers can't. Who's shooting? Like what's your spacing look like with 3, 4, 5 as LeBron, AD, and a 5 that's not Vucevic? If it's Vuce, then maybe. But
I do find it funny though that so Lakers are linked to all these other big, like Jonas Valanciunas is on their radar. Then it's the Lakers are moving off making any deals. Anthony Davis comes out and said something. Immediately the reporting is Lakers are ramping up their efforts to come and get a big. And look, I honestly hope that Anthony Davis is just this is a bit at this point, or maybe he just wants like someone behind him who's not Jackson Hayes, which I totally understand. Yeah. But that's not their biggest need. It's one of their needs because Anthony Davis has identified it as such. A backup big man, sure, but a big man to get AD to slide down to the 4 where he will never be closing. Like who? Maybe Vooch. Like you're closing games with him and Vooch together, like with LeBron. Good luck on defense, I suppose. I don't know, but I will say Anthony Davis has done enough defensive heavy lifting that I do think he's kind of like earned if I'm going to. But I really hope this is a bit from him.
But he is a center. He is a center. Like I get it. I get it when it's like, I'm trying to think of a better example. If like, I don't think he ever did it, but if PJ Tucker was like, I'm not playing center, I think PJ Tucker was like, this is awesome. And then like, if Draymond Green says, I can't hold up over a full season playing center, it's like, 1, we know that's kind of true. And 2, like, I get it. You're 6'6.5". Like when Anthony Davis says it, it's just like, I understand you don't prefer it, but you must see that your team cannot be what it needs to be if you're not playing center. Like it's just, anyway, that it's a beside the point. Well, not
what is
beside
their
the point.
Actual biggest need, Grant.
Can I just say not that? It's another like playmaker, because Austin Reeves, I'm enjoying the point guard stylings of Austin Reeves. I think it still would be very helpful if they had, well, this has been the issue since D'Angelo Russell was there, and which he's not anymore, is like a primary initiator that is not going to give back a bunch of stuff on defense and or is good enough in that role that you can stomach that giving back some on defense. And then again, like Dorian Finney-Smith is kind of the model of like another guy that is going to be able to defend multiple positions and make open threes. I think those are your 2 main things for them.
I like the way that Austin Reeves has played. And now that D'Angelo Russell's gone, I like a Zach LaVine trade for them more than ever.
I've always liked it.
We both always liked it, but now I'm just sort of like, give him the money, like Gabe Vincent, Jared Vanderbilt, Rui Hachimura is gonna have to be involved in that. And if it takes, like, if you could structure it where it's the first round pick, like you did with Utah, it's top 4 protected or something, and then it turns in like it's done. I would do that trade if I'm LA. I know that's like you're kind of splitting the baby at that point, but I like that trade for them a lot.
If you can get Zach LaVine for 1 first and salary that you don't really care about, I think you're almost obligated to do that as the Lakers. I think it's like that the price is too good. You know what I mean? Even now, the price was probably even better if you'd done this a year ago and just had some foresight and hoped he was going to get healthy. But a 1 first for a guy that's just an incredibly good offensive player that isn't going to be the initiator you want, but is immediately your best pure scorer. Like, I don't know why you don't do that.
Well, because he can't play center.
I guess Zach LaVine doesn't want to play center either. That's the hang up here.
I'm actually trying to do this math in real time, but I've kind of wondered as like, would they be so, I don't even know what the word would be, but if they're going to get picks back as part of this, like, why aren't they being mentioned as like a Bradley Beal team?
Well, okay, let's figure that out. What's the
So Bradley, can you
Who
just
are
let
they
me know how
getting
much
picks
Bradley Beal
from?
makes?
They're getting the shitty 3 firsts from the Suns.
They're getting 2 of them or something like that. They're facilitating the Jimmy Butler trade and I guess helping a conference. There's probably just no realistic financial functional way for them to do it because right now I've included Dorian Finney-Smith can't go out, but I have Rui, Gabe Vincent, Jared Vanderbilt, Jalen Hood-Schifino is $42.6 million. How shy of Bradley Beal's salary is that?
He's like right at 50 and change this year.
So they would have to do like Max Christie or Austin Reeves, which you can't. Like that's not where Max Christie's been actually playing pretty well for them too. So that's why they're not being mentioned as a Bradley Beal team.
I mean, yeah, you wouldn't think the difference between Levine's salary and his is that significant, but it actually is.
You know what, they've run into a problem because we're making jokes about the center spot, but it's like even a Vooch trade, if it was only going to cost you seconds and then like the contracts you want to send out, nobody wants the contracts the Lakers want to send out.
Right.
Like they're viewing, I would say with Jared Vanderbilt being injured so much and Gabe Vincent specifically, they're viewing taking on those deals as part of the value they're providing to the Lakers. And so then you get into the discussion of, well, what else can you give us? And they only have 2 seconds to trade. So they have their own 2025 second and the Clippers' 2025 second. Neither of those are like, they could include swaps, I guess, if they want to do something like that. But that's an issue they're running into as well. Because it's like, would Washington even do Jonas Valanciunas for Gabe Vincent and one of those seconds? Is that something that they would do? Maybe.
I think, but if I'm Washington, I'm like, I think I can just get expiring money or more for Valanciunas next year. Like, why do I want Gabe Vincent? You know what I mean? Like, it's, I guess maybe that really, you're absolutely right. Like, if even one of like Vincent, Vanderbilt, throw Hachimura in there, even though I think he's just a better player than either of those guys. If even one of those were expiring, it's a very different conversation. But because every single one of those guys has money next year, it's just like, yeah, you're as the Lakers, you're like, what are you really offering with those guys? You're not offering like salary relief. It's just, we'll take back worse money, I guess, or money you want less. And you'll for I don't know. It's just, they have a lot of salaries that are obviously tradable. They don't have a lot of salaries that are obviously tradable for positive value just because they go into next year.
If you're Toronto, are those 2 seconds attached to either one of, actually, I think Vincent would, they both might require more money going out. Now I think about, so Gabe Vincent's at 11. That is more than Boucher. And Jared Vanderbilt's at 10.7, which is probably, I think it's a little less than Boucher, but are those 2 seconds attached? And Vincent is probably the one they'd prefer just because he has less time left on his deal. Are you doing that?
I mean, weren't there reports that Toronto was thinking about bringing Boucher back on another deal?
They should. He's really good. But they have Kelly Olynyk. They have Jakob Poeltl. They have Scotty Barnes. Even like if you don't view Chris Boucher as like a pure 5 for you, I mean, the Lakers could consider like, would you do it for Olynyk? Like, are you more inclined to do that as like it would have to be Hood-Schifino, those 2 seconds, and then one of those other salaries.
Yeah, there's your expiring salary. They got Hood-Schifino. They declined his option.
That helped the Lakers shed some payroll too. Like that might be real. And like Boucher, he would be him or maybe even Olynyk. I don't know that you would, but like that would be, I'd be okay with that. As like, can you sell it to AD as like, look, we got another big, because I even like that more than like Vooch, because like Boucher specifically, where it's okay, like he can kind of do more than like Vucevic is going to do what on defense for you? Rebound?
Yeah, that defense. Right, defensive rebound. That's it. He's otherwise going to hurt you.
And Olynyk actually does none of that. So like Boucher would do like he'd give you a little bit more optionality there defensively. He's not necessarily like the greatest defender, except between my ears and by my own eyes. So do you expect them to do anything? Like, is it at this point, are we just expecting them? They'll probably get a reserve big type to placate AD and move on.
It feels like a Valanciunas or whatever type of thing. I don't, as much as I want the Levine thing to happen, I think it's going to be the another center, and it'll be Vincent going out and probably not Hachimura, because I think they actually he has like real uses, and I don't think Vanderbilt is someone that other teams want on the books going forward. So that seems the most likely outcome.
I'm assuming if it's Jackson Hayes or Reddish and Hood-Schifino, or if it's just maybe 2 of those guys, 2 of those 3, plus those 2 seconds for Day'Ron Sharpe, or the Nets saying, Probably no.
I don't know. You think Reddish has any like flyer value anymore now that he's on his like 7th team, and every team seems to think they can figure him out? Maybe.
Honestly, there's a chance the Knicks will give up a first-round pick for him, I think.
I think if I'm Brooklyn, Brooklyn's one of the few teams where I could justify like Reddish actually being kind of intriguing, because like, what do you got to lose? And the upside is enough teams have been convinced of his upside that there might be something there still.
But like Daron Sharp's expiring, they pay I ultimately don't think it's enough, but that would be like, I'm trying to just think of like the cheapo bigs that they could, like, I'm sure maybe the Clippers would give them Mo Bamba at this point, but whoever the Lakers send back as a repeat of the Zubac trade probably turns into like a borderline all-star.
What's Duop Reith going to cost you? Something like that.
I mean, you could definitely get him for one of those seconds.
Yeah, and if it's Hood Schifino, so the money just comes off in a second for Reith, maybe. I don't know.
Would AD be okay with that? Imagine the Lakers.
Is he enough of a center?
They did get Dorian Finney-Smith, who to date is the best player that's been traded. So there's that. But like, imagine they go through this deadline and it's just like, we got Duop Reith, and that's just it.
Tough look.
Our next team is my team, and they are the Memphis Grizzlies. I guess they were in on the, well, let's do this first. They're $1.8 million below the tax. And as a note, they're not paying the tax, everybody. I don't want to hear, I've heard it from like, they're not paying the tax. Let's move on. They control all their own firsts. I'm curious to see how many they would move, because going beyond 2025 was a deal breaker for them in the Dorian Finney-Smith sweepstakes. However, them going after Dorian Finney-Smith does at least prove that they're being active. Is that their biggest need? Do you think it's like they have Gigi Jackson back now and they've just been like, they're so deep? Everybody's still like Vince Williams and Marcus Smart are still injured, but do you view that as their biggest need is just, they have Jalen Wells, they have Gigi Jackson, but you want an upgrade in that 3-and-D type spot?
Yeah, I want someone bigger than Wells that is going to be, you throw at the bigger wings and bigger forwards. As good as Wells has been, I just think he's not quite, it doesn't quite have the size. And then like, I guess, the theory of Marcus Smart is kind of what you want, but it's just, you can't count on him being
the other thing too is like, it falls to Wells. That is just like, who are you comfortable by saying like that guy's going to guard point of attack in the playoffs right now? Some people might say Scottie Pippen Jr., I guess, but that's just, I don't know.
He's too small. I mean, he's small too. Like, you're not great on ones. I don't love him on twos. I don't love Wells on a lot of threes, even though that is what he's had to do, which is probably why he should win Rookie of the Year, because he's been way better at that than he has a right to be. But just a big wing that you can throw it. Like when you see, I was going to say Jason Tatum, but I don't know if the Grizzlies are making the finals, but like someone to throw it at the Jason Tatums of the world is what you're looking for here.
You know who I would kind of like for them? Vic Krejci. Well, but they were like, wasn't there reporting that said we know Jimmy Butler doesn't want to go there, but that they'd be in on him anyway? I wouldn't hate him here. I don't know what it does to their spacing, because that's something else they could stand to do is drive up the value of the efficiency of their half-court offense. But I think Vic Krejci for me, like he's sneakily like 6'7", 6'8", can do some things on defense. His floor spacing is like kind of a fly-by-night thing, but he can do some ball handling for you. I don't know what you give. Just like that's like, could you do Atlanta? I don't know what their aims are now post Jalen Johnson injury. They don't control their own first-round picks, but is there something to be done as Memphis where Vic Krejci is so cheap? Are you taking back something else from Atlanta, like a Larry Nance Jr., or I don't know if you could get Garrison Matthews. I mean, if you got Garrison Matthews and Vic Krejci in the same trade, I think that would actually help them. But
yeah, I mean,
I guess Zeller just as salary filler, and you're moving who is Memphis? Like, I don't know. Like Conchar, maybe that would do something with like some second round compensation there.
Yeah, I mean, like with the Hawks, I mean, Krejci does a fair amount of ball handling, and that's a need for them too. Like so
their season's over was really my like. But you're right, they don't have an incentive to be bad, so you are correct there.
Yeah. What do you think? I know we've talked a little bit about Santi Aldama, and I think like the right answer may just be he is too important to your team this year, and you're very good, and you should just care about right now. But like, there is a restricted free agency coming up for him. You maybe aren't as Memphis comfortable paying him what he's actually going to be worth. And he is really someone I think that would have like pretty significant value is he someone you're even really considering moving, or are you more focused on like you said, Conchar and guys like that?
I mean, if the right offer, like if Boston comes around and they're not trusting KP's health and Al Horford getting older, and it's we want to give you Jaden Springer and 2 first-round picks for Santi Aldama, I'd probably consider it. But it's just, he's been so good for them that I don't know that you would want to. Like who has been their second best big man behind Jaren Jackson Jr.?
I mean, there aren't that many candidates. It's Edey, it's Clark, or it's Aldama.
I mean, Jay Huff's per minute stats are pretty.
Jay Huff. I think it probably is Aldama, right? I mean, he's got a shot at 6-man. I think, which, like, I don't think you'd say that about any of the other guys.
No, so that's. I think you listen. I don't like if they're just. I've mentioned his name a bunch. Like, can you get Cody? You have John Conchar, attach a smaller salary to him, like just to get Cody Martin, and then I think you do Conchar for Cody Martin and still duck the tax. Like that's someone who I trust guarding point of attack guys more than probably anyone else they have right now. Jalen Wells might come pretty close at that. It's like maybe something like that. But more of the story is they could make a major move. Just they have that Marcus Smart salary. They have Luke Kennard is expiring. He's an implicit no trade clause. They have the Brandon Clark money. I just don't expect them to do anything major.
It doesn't seem like it. Although their interest in Butler at least suggests they're like thinking about it. There's just not anything that, again, why is Marcus Smart like the key to this team? Like, one, if he was healthy and good, their needs would be very different. And two, if they want to do anything, it sort of needs to involve his salary. And because he hasn't been healthy and good, nobody wants that salary. So it's like,
what if Atlanta was willing to listen on DeAndre Hunter?
Oh man. So what are you sending Atlanta in that? Is that it's got to be smart.
I mean, does Atlanta want 2 contracts? Do they want just Marcus Smart? You could go that route attached to picks. Maybe one like, and also just like sort of a stab in the dark on if they were willing to give you Jay Huff or Vincent Williams Jr. That's not, I know because of injuries and like limited playing time with Huff, they're like kind of a throw-in, but they're super intriguing throw-ins.
So Hunter makes about $1 million more than Smart does.
That's fine for Memphis. You're just ducking the tax. But like, what if it's
that's the thing. The sweetener you throw in with Smart, if it's good enough, might get that done with a pick and also get you under the tax. If the sweetener's like in the $3 to $4 million range.
Well, they're 1.8 million below the tax, so they take it.
Sorry, I was thinking over. Never mind. Disregard everything I said about that.
Do you think like Atlanta? Are they doing? What do you need to attach to Marcus Smart then? Because he's like net negative. So is it Vince? Does Vincent Williams Jr. plus a first, let's say in 2026? Like, is that get Atlanta listening? Is Atlanta going to be more because they might have 2 2025 picks already,
right?
From Sacramento and the Lakers.
It could be. If you're Atlanta, would you have interest in Huff since Capella is going to come off the books here? And then
I absolutely would for sure. Yeah.
I think if you're trying to hold on to first, I think the right team might see Huff as like, yeah, that's going to be our first big off the bench for the next 5 years, like that.
So you're thinking Huff, Smart, and a first. Is that enough for DeAndre Hunter? It feels. I might throw some seconds in there, but it feels a little light still, doesn't it?
Maybe a little bit, but we're talking about this from Memphis's perspective. I'm definitely doing that if I'm Memphis. If you're Atlanta, Atlanta's in a weird spot, but from Atlanta's side, is Hunter going to be better than this like ever? Like, is this, are you?
And the other thing is too, is like you have Dyson Daniels, if Jalen Johnson's going to be healthy, and then Zachary Ricochet, like that's kind of your like 2, 3, 4 rotation of the future. You obviously need others, but you're right. This is the peak of DeAndre Hunter's value because we entered the season where people were wondering, I thought this was egregious, whether they would have to include a pick to get off his money.
Yeah.
We're not even get a pick.
It's easy to forget how bad it has felt with Hunter in the recent past. The deal.
Does he do enough for you where it's like, oh, we did not solve their point of attack questions in the playoffs at all?
And that's the thing. Like the theory of DeAndre Hunter, however many years ago, was like he is that guy where he just defensively no problem. Like yes, I feel great with him out, and it's like in reality he hasn't quite been that guy. He'd be a good offensive upgrade. I think he would address some of their issues. Like half court offense always is an issue with the Grizzlies, although like they've been top 5 for most of the year on both ends. I do think you're right though that Hunter isn't the set it and forget it, big wing defender that would be ideal for Memphis.
Yeah. But that would be like an interesting, just as a 3-and-D wing. Like they're so deep. You have to wonder, is DeAndre Hunter enough of an upgrade to say, oh, we know he's going to, because they're closing guys we know are Triple J, Desmond Bain, and John Morant. I guess that gives you, those are the only three that are kind of bolted down for them. So maybe it gives you more flexibility, but I would like Hunter there. That's an interesting one. If we were talking about bigger swings for them, Grant, these are your Minnesota Timberwolves.
Here we go. They're expensive, Dan. $16.1 million into the second apron, which would be about a $90 million or a little over a $90 million tax bill. Whoever ends up owning the team, is that something they're comfortable paying? Worthwhile to ask that. They can trade Detroit's 2025 first that has top 13 protection. That protection goes to top 11 in 26, top 9 in 27, becomes a 27 second if not conveyed. They have a 28 swap available. Also have the Jazz's 25 second. I'm trying to, my like sigh is like, do we just start by talking about Julius Randle, or is that really just me harping on the same issue that I've had for them all year?
Oh, sorry. We didn't do most likely player to be traded for Memphis.
Oh, Conchar.
Me too. That's what I would have. For the Timberwolves, that might be where we need to start. Is do you actually like, because if they make a move, here would be the candidates to be traded. Are you going to get to a point where you think that you have no chance of keeping Naz Reid or Nickeil Alexander-Walker when they go into free agency? Probably not. Like, well, who is coming in and outbidding you for Nah?
Well, I think that's a worthwhile question, but the related question is, can we afford to trade either of those guys if we're still serious about being as good as we can this year?
No, that was the dilemma I was getting into. Is if you look at the top 8, and if you want to say top 9, depending on the like, if you think DiVincenzo is going to be back this year, and also that you like the way that what you've seen from Rob Dillingham recently, how are you upgrading off of that? Like, while solving, because I think you could say they probably need more shooting, or they need like another type of playmaker that's like, because Conley's been up and down and you don't know what to expect from Dillingham. But like this team, I think in hindsight, no, you should not have made the Julius Randle trade, like from a basketball perspective, but he's not actually been terrible.
No.
So I just like, I don't know where they have the Detroit pick, but I just like, if you were going to do something serious, it has to be Julius Randle and that pick. And then it's for what?
This is the thing. I mean, I think this is the core issue is they have guys they absolutely could trade. And in other circumstances, it would make sense to move guys like Nah and like Naz Reid, certainly Randall. I don't think you can get better moving almost anyone that they can trade. So like, if your criticism, and I think it's been a fair one, is that the Cat trade was financially motivated, I think we can close the book on that, right? Like, at least it has turned out that there was not a case to be made that it improves them on the floor, even if there was a hypothetical one at the time. Like, if you make another trade like that, I'm so annoyed and frustrated as a fan base, right? Like, it just, which isn't to say they won't do that, because if you've done it once at the scale they did, like, certainly it's believable you'll try it again. But I don't know how you're getting better by moving any of the guys we've just talked about. So like, I would still want to move Randall. And I think like in an ideal world, he would just say, I'm going to go into free agency. And then suddenly a team is like, great, 30 million coming off the books. We'll take him. What do you want? But then did Minnesota just get him in hopes that would happen anyway?
Yeah.
They want that salary relief. So I this is a fascinating team, but I keep circling back to like, I just don't see the trade that gets them that makes them better using the pieces they have that are hypothetically available. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just don't know what the path is to improving, which I still think they should be trying to do. Because like, I'm never going to quit this team, even though the results just haven't been great. I still believe somewhere in here is a really good team.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you have Jay McDaniels since January 1st is shooting like 40% from 3 on 4 attempts per game, the volume should still be higher than that. But like, if that's the version of Jay McDaniels you're going to get, I'm not going to be able to quit this team in a playoff setting either. And so, but I do wonder, we have this notes, like, I will believe that this is the other, like, I don't know if we're approaching it from this perspective enough, is we've assumed that the Wolves are at least going to eat it this year. I will believe that Glenn Taylor pays a $90+ million tax bill when I see it.
Okay.
And that, I didn't, at least in the back of my mind, where are they going to use the looming threat of free agencies for any one of the 3 players we just mentioned to try and lop off money and like sell it as like, oh, like another basketball move type deal?
So Okay, let's go with that then. So you got to get. What do you need to get down to make a real dent? If let's say you just want to shed 16 or just call it 17 million to get out of the second apron, and that saves you what, like
you
3x?
have to use Randall at that point because the other two aren't even making 17 million.
And you're trading him for no money coming back, so,
No,
right?
I'm just saying, like, are they trying to slash their tax bill somehow? Where it's just like, oh, we saved $10 million as part of. They're still in the second apron, but they've now slashed that they're in a different tax band. Maybe they're not paying as much in one of the upper tax bands of it. I'm not saying they should not do this. I want to make that clear, but I will believe that Glenn Taylor pays this tax bill when I see it.
No, I think I'm inclined to agree. So I'm just wondering what that even looks like. We can concede, like, don't do this, Wolves, but like if they do go down that road, it's like, are you sending Randall to Detroit and taking back like a
Tim Hardaway Jr. and I don't know who else. And like, are you giving Detroit their pick to do that back?
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Well, like Tim Hardaway Jr., Simone Fontecchio for Julius Randle should work if you're giving Detroit's pick back.
I mean, I kind of love that for the Wolves too, just because I'm so out on Randall. Yeah, I mean, I wish there was more to say about them. It's bad. I don't like this situation at all. I really wish they just kept Cat and just figured it out. But here we are.
I still think they're pretty threatening. Like if you catch them on the right, like series of nights, this is all like this typifies them. So since January 1st, they're only 2 games above 500, but they have a top 6 net rating. Net rating. Nothing about this team, like on a night-to-night basis, doesn't necessarily make sense. Like you see them, I've also gone back and forth on their needs where I'm like, all right, their defense with their top end units is set. And then I watch them and I'm like, you know what? No, it's not. So it's just like,
yeah, right. I mean, I think just to sort of treat them like the other teams we've talked about, I think their biggest need is still someone that, while granting that it's always going to be tricky with Rudy Gobert in the middle, they still just need someone that makes it so Anthony Edwards doesn't have to just be your floor spacer too. Like someone that's just going to make enough plays on the ball, which like even if DiVincenzo's playing well, that isn't him and he's hurt anyway. Conley can't be that guy consistently. Dillingham, I don't think they're going to give a real shot to, and is probably too young to expect that from. That's what if we're just talking needs and not like feasibility of addressing them, it is just, I think, someone to turn the offense into a different version of what they have right now. Like Edwards can't be this player, I don't think. Like that's not an optimized version of him or the Wolves offense.
No, it's not. I mean, could you get Colin Sexton from Utah for Julius Randle in that Detroit pick? And then Utah's gonna have to send out probably more money there.
Maybe. I love how you're so solution oriented. I'm just pointing out like there's the problem, and then you have a name.
I don't like when I listen to people. I'm not saying I don't like you. I mean, I hate you, listeners. But like, I don't want to be the podcast, and we do this. Sometimes it's just too tough.
Right.
But I don't want to be the podcast like, well, this is wrong, but we're not going to like, especially on a trade preview. But they can't do anything about it.
Let's see. Let's get some more names.
You know what'd be really funny if they just sent Mike Conley into Detroit's cap space, and that's how they were like slashing their like that. And they're like, we're gonna give Dillingham a shot, and that's how they spin it.
That's the thing. They have cover for like every like bullshit financially motivated move they could make. Is just like, oh, Rob's ready. Let's get him in there. You know, we believe in him.
Who's most likely to be traded? I don't think I'll tell you who I went with. I don't think they're ready to give up on Leonard Miller. My guess is that like it would just be Joe Ingles. Like, let's get rid of by shedding the minimum contract and you save a few $1 million in tax. I don't know if he's too important in the locker room, but I assume that's why you have Mike Conley there.
Yeah, I think your locker room's okay as long as Conley's there. And really, honestly, Edwards. Yeah, I guess I would love to say Randall, and I would love to just say it better not be Naz Reid or
you want Randall gone. Give me at least try to give me a Randall. So like, who is the Randall suitor or team that's like, what is the Randall trade?
There isn't one unless you have him broadcasting he's not picking up his option. Because you got to have a $30 million player to send back, and 2, you have to decide that Randall you have to decide that Randall is not only going to improve you now, but is also worth potentially having on the books next year. So like, I don't know.
So we're at Randall for Patrick Williams, nice little challenge trade, and who else?
How many teams are Patrick Williams to?
Or would they wouldn't give you, if you did Randall and let's say he's coming off the books and that Detroit pick for Patrick Williams and Kobe White. The Bulls aren't doing that, right?
Because what you're getting is a first and salary relief, and you're giving, I don't think so. Just because, you are getting off Patrick Williams' money.
Would you do just straight up no pick? If maybe you give up the Utah 2025 second, but Randall you wouldn't give up. If anything, Chicago should maybe give a pick here. Io and Patrick Williams for Julius Randle.
Yeah, I think Chicago's given the pick there, maybe, if you're assuming the salary relief. What about, can we get Cole Anthony on this to the Wolves somehow? What's that? I guess
why does Orlando want Randle? I don't think Randall's been bad enough to say let's enter the Patrick Williams business just because he might be less I don't know, he's making less per year.
It's tough out here. Let's just land on Joe Ingles as the most likely Wolf to be traded and move on.
The Pelicans, they're my team, right? So they're $2.1 million into the tax. Spoiler alert, they suck this year and are not going to pay the tax. Also, spoiler alert, they could have been great this year. They still wouldn't have paid the tax. They have no real extra first to trade anymore. They'll have the 2025 Milwaukee first if it lands in the top 4. That's a nice little lottery ticket there, I guess. They have swap rights with Milwaukee in 26, and their own 27 first-round pick is headed to Atlanta. It'll be the more favorable of their own or Milwaukee's, though. So I guess you could say that's their extra first-round pick, but it's spoken for. Grant, what? So let's start here because it leads into is Brandon Ingram the most likely player to be traded on the Pelicans? And why is the answer no?
Well, the answer is no, because nobody wants his next deal and wants to give up the amount of money it would take to onboard him. He's a little bit like Randall, except that you do know he's at least going to hit free agency. But I think I'd rather have him than Randall. Well, if it isn't Ingram, it could be someone like Javonte Green, that will get you under the tax. Does he get you there? Just not quite. Does he?
Oh, he doesn't? What is he at 2.0?
It's like 2,287,000. So it's a rounding error.
Well, wait, maybe I rounded up for the graphics. So the Pelicans are they're over 2.1 million. Yeah, so it can't be.
It could be Green, and because Green you might actually get something for, and
it's
then
Green and Tice. Just move that work. 2 of Green, Tice, and Jeremiah Robinson Earl teams can just take them in, and you're done. I think that's the. And I want teams to trade. Get Javonte Green on the Knicks right now, please.
Sure. Yeah. So that's why it's not Brandon Ingram, because the other reason it's not Brandon Ingram is because he hasn't been traded yet, and that suggests that's very, very hard to trade him. These smaller time moves, which for the cheap ass Pelicans is just they're gonna do one of those, And
what to be fair to the Pelicans, this isn't a situation where McCollum's money. You don't attach anything to anyone right now to get off of money. That's not, you want to duck the tax. Okay, fine. You should, you suck. Duck the tax. We know that DeJounte Murray's would also help some. The incentives in his contract aren't going to push them over the tax either. You don't have to account for that now. That'll help. Here's the thing with Brandon Ingram. I think they're not trading Zion. What would it take for you to trade Zion? Let's start there.
I'm going to need a
minimum of 2 unprotected first-round picks.
I was going to say 3. I don't know if you're getting. Yeah, it's going to be multiple unprotected firsts, and I'm not taking back a dime of money that's even debatable.
So Bradley Beal and those 3 less favorable picks aren't doing it for you. That's upsetting.
Probably not. Is there a team I talk all the time about how there's just no more bad contracts? Who's got more bad money than New Orleans right now? Between
the bad money,
McCollum's bad money. I think Murray is debatably bad money.
Okay,
Zion might be bad. There's a lot. Brandon Ingram is technically bad money because nobody wants it.
No, I think he's expiring. Zion can be expiring if you think that's bad money.
It strikes me as I look at the cap sheet, man, you guys, because you said you can't be giving up picks to get off of some of these deals, and if it's talking about McCollum, it's well then you're not getting off that deal. That's the definition of bad money to me.
I'm not even going to get into trade targets for them because they should not be even remotely thinking about that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to ask you, are you at the point where you just move Brandon Ingram for anything? Or are you chancing it into the summer and saying, you're either going to need our help to go somewhere and we'll get compensated then, or we're going to get you at a number that you didn't want, but that we're comfortable with, rather than trade you for, like, I don't even think, like, is a good, like, the Warriors, would they even give you non-Wiggins contracts plus a protected first for Brandon Ingram? I probably not.
No, I think there is a good chance now. I mean, every day that goes by, it gets better, that the right move is to just like, nah, we don't see the sense in taking back whatever we might get for Ingram. Let's hold on to him and maybe the market changes, which is like, it just, that never used to seem like the right decision. But I like, look, what do we even know has been offered for him? If any, all we ever hear is like, nobody wants him because of what he's going to try to get in free agency.
So I guess what's the minimum as the Pelicans? Because I'm at this point, I'm just like, just let this roll in the free agency, and maybe you just get him back at a number and you can move it later, and he plays better or something. But what is like the minimum return you would need as the Pelicans to get rid of Brandon Ingram ahead of free agency? By the way, complicating all this is he's been injured.
Right. Yeah. I think I don't feel like there's really a way to take back expiring money for him. And so if I'm assuming I'm getting a salary back, or salaries that are, most of which are on the books next year. So let's just say, I don't know, there's like 20 million or 25 million on the books next year in any return for him. Maybe one of the players comes off or whatever. I still think I'm not going to move him now unless I'm getting a first, like a real one. And I don't think that offer's on the table. So I think, to your point, that's why you just like punt and wait and hope that you can, like you said, bring him back at a number that maybe the league would be willing to trade for him at, or you'd be willing to keep him at. Because like, I just haven't heard anything rumored that would justify doing it now. And when you don't really technically have to.
So like, let's just say it's shoehorned into the Jimmy Butler 8-team trade that's going to happen. If you just got expiring money and one of those picks that Phoenix is sending out somewhere, that's enough for you to say, yeah, we'll cut bait with Brandon Ingram now?
I think it's close. I think I might want like a real, those are real firsts, but like a higher upside first. Because I still kind of think if I get him back at a number, I mean, he's not obligated to re-sign with them. That's the other thing. It's just, where's he going to go? I think I might be able to do better than that. And if the downside is he just comes off the books, then all I've sacrificed is like a pick in the 20s. That, you know what I mean? Like it's borderline. That's a close case. I think I might still hold out if that's the.
So would I. I was just curious if that was like your minimum. If you were getting maybe 2 of those picks,
yeah, then maybe. Because I think if you talk about I know I've said this before, but Kevin Pelton had the equivalent value of those 3 picks is like the number 6 pick. So if the equivalent value of 2 of them is like 13, then like, yeah, all right, I could see that. I'd take a number 13 pick in a random draft, or the equivalent value of it for Brandon Ingram. That's fine. It's like lottery protection, sort of close to it.
So we both have Javonte Green most likely to be a trade, because I feel like a team might give a 2nd-round pick for him.
Yep, and the tax stuff.
Next team up, the Thunder. Grant, have fun with this one.
I can't believe you don't have all the picks listed. They're 10.3 million below the tax. They can take back about 10 million if they trade Ousmane Dieng alone. They have the what is that abbreviation? Oh, about an $8 million room exception. Too many first-round picks to go through, obviously. I wish you had tried. That's fun.
Hey, so anyway, I nutshelled it. You're welcome.
You did nutshell it for me. That helps. The Thunder own their next 7 firsts. They also have up to 6 additional incoming firsts. 2027 swap rights with the Clips, 2028 swap rights with Dallas. Can do anything they want. Don't seem inclined to do anything crazy, but it just needs to be said that whoever has the best offer for like anyone out there, they can just get involved if they want to. So what their needs we've talked about, like both here and in other pod episodes, just another main creator that is an upgrade on Jalen Williams, and then you can go down the list. I guess it's still, you're talking about a team that's really great, and it's another situation where it's like, you could add another big, you can add more shooting, bigger shooters. We've talked about a lot, like bigger than Isaiah Joe, maybe more consistent than Aaron Wiggins, or higher volume than Aaron Wiggins. I'm still, the core issue here comes down to like whoever they add, do they have a shot to be in a closing lineup? And if the answer is no, then there's a justification for keeping the powder dry, even though they have like truckloads of powder.
Yeah, it's tough to find like realistic that also fit, by the way, within like their pay structure moving forward, because Shea is going to start or sign a new deal. Chet and Jalen Williams are eventually going to get more expensive. They paid Alex Caruso. Some of these other, like, Case and Wallace, depending on if he's a long-term piece for them, those are guys. They have Aaron Wiggins and Isaiah Joe on long-term cheap deals. Of the names that are realistically available, do any of them get you thinking about not standing pat at the deadline? I'm going to go through. Let's start with Cam Johnson. They were tangentially linked to him, and then they were unlinked to him. But is that like you could structure it however you want? Like, do you need Wiggins and Isaiah Joe and a pick to get that done? Is it just one of them, and then maybe you want to send out Ousmane Dieng too, and there's picks involved? The Nets want the equivalent of 2 first-round picks, which is like literally nothing to the Thunder. That's like, sure, here you go. But is that someone that moves you to, one, part with those assets, and then two, is like in a vacuum, I think you could say, all right, if it was one of Wiggins and Joe and there's some first round equity involved, sure. But if we're talking both, or I think even the bigger question is, when you're just looking at the context of your team, I think his salary structure will fit with them moving forward, but is he good enough to get you to make a pretty substantial midseason move?
I think there is at least a case that he could close, provided they're going with one big, which I don't know if that's the right decision to close. I still think there's I'm very curious about like extended minutes with Hartenstein and Chet as your 4-5. I think if I'm the Thunder and it's going to cost me 2 firsts, I think I probably, and matching salary if it's Joe and or Wiggins or however you want to put it together. If you can do it using Dieng as like a significant piece of that salary, awesome. He's only making $5 million, but maybe as a
situation beneath the tax means that that's a lot of money they could take back. 10
right.
million. Yeah.
I think I do that. Even while acknowledging that Johnson might not meet the criteria I just laid out, as like, he's at least a consideration to close. And again, the price is for them 2 firsts is like, okay, sure. I think I would consider that pretty strongly. While acknowledging that Johnson is like playing basically the best he's ever played. Like that's a little risky, but for the Thunder, it's like, it's a potentially marginal upgrade for a marginal price. And that's fine with me at this point for them.
What about, this is a name I was thinking about, and I'm trying to do the most minimalistic amount of names going out. There are other ways to build this deal, but if it was, this works financially. Kenrich Williams, 2 first-round picks for Kobe White.
I think I'm definitely I do that before I do the Cam Johnson deal.
What if one of those picks has to be the Philly pick this year?
So potentially like the number 7 pick. If I can make the other of the firsts, I'm trying to think which one that, like my own, maybe, if I'm the Thunder.
So in 2000, they have an interesting, so why we don't have all the swaps listed, like the 27 and 28 swaps on screen for anybody, those are like independent swaps, whereas like these other swaps are tied to them getting multiple first round picks. But I think in 2026, they're going to get like 2 of the Houston, LA Clippers, and their own picks. So let's say it's the second most favorable of those 3, which would really be the least favorable of whichever first round pick the Thunder are holding in 26.
Man, I think White, again, the closing thing, I don't know, but White kind of just like makes your offense foolproof, like with Shea off the floor. I think he's that good as a guy that you could just give the ball to, and then Jalen Williams is again in a second option role. I think I'd do that if it's. I think I would consider that, because White's worth a good first, like, at least, yeah, right? Like
if it was just the Philly pick, I'd do it in a heartbeat. It's the second first round pick that gives me pause. But if I'm the Bulls, even though like you might get, like, Philly might not be, like, what if they just make the play-in and everybody's healthy? Like that pick could just then convey at like 16 or so, like it could be outside the lottery or late lottery. And I think Kobe White is certainly worth more than that. Mm-hmm. I guess the one concern would be he's on the books this year for $12 million. He's cheap through next year, but then he's going to be a free agent in 2026. And so that's when new deals will have kicked in for Chet, Shea, and J-Dub at that point. I would be team you just figure it out as you
Right.
go.
Right. And if it's a rental, it's a rental. You're good enough right now to justify a rental, right? I mean, it's not it's a year and a half rental or whatever. If I'm the Bulls, I think, well, who knows what the Bulls actually want, but if
the
I'm the
Bulls
Bulls,
should do that trade, by the way. If that,
Yeah.
you could probably they could reroute Kenrich Williams and get like, and by the way, if OKC really wanted to, they could do something like Ousmane Dieng and Dylan Jones.
I was just going to say, if I'm the Bulls, and some other teams that hopefully rebuild, I want to look at Ousmane Dieng. I want to see if he's a second draft guy potentially. He hasn't worked out for the Thunder, but like he's still really young, and there's a reason I trust that the Thunder weren't totally out of their minds when they gave up a bunch of picks to move up to get him. I still think like I'm interested in a guy that they valued that way.
If you're OKC, what type of structure for Kobe White would you prefer? Is it Ousmane Dieng? Like, would you rather trade just Kenrich Williams in a vacuum? That's all you have to send out. Or would you rather try to have to attach big Jalen Williams or Dylan Jones to Ousmane Dieng's salary to get it done?
I think I'm more interested in the Dieng construction. Because I think Williams actually might still matter, and big Jalen Williams, I think, might still matter for them.
So it would be Dieng and Dylan Jones. Then they could view that as, we're giving you 3 firsts for Kobe White.
There you go. That's how you spin it. Very recent first.
I don't think they would do that.
You don't think the Thunder would do that?
I don't think they would do. I mean, Kenrich is important because of all the injuries to Holmgren and Hartenstein, of course. But like, I don't know. And they love him in OKC. I was just trying to do it like the minimum return. I guess if I'm OKC, I'd probably prefer Dieng and big Jalen Williams. But then it's all right. Now it's Hartenstein and Holmgren is like your 5s, and then we're really in Kenrich Williams and J-Dub territory as your 5.
Well, we know that actually works out okay for stretches. But yeah, no, I guess I'm giving up on Dieng, and then that's the reason I'm gravitating towards that package from the Thunder's perspective.
I think that's fair. It's just, do you think they would give? Because I think the Bulls should do it either way. I think they're very much. I don't think the Thunder would do Dylan Jones, Dieng, 2 firsts for Kobe White. I really don't think they would do that.
Dylan Jones, Dieng, 2 firsts for Kobe White. I don't know. I could see it. I guess it depends on what they think about Dylan Jones. And if they could mess with which firsts we're talking about, I suppose.
I guess if it's not the Philly pick,
maybe
it's
not.
A different conversation.
Yeah. I don't know.
Are there any other names or realistic names that would get you as the Thunder to think about making like an actual move at the deadline?
I mean, we're obligated to mention Cody Martin. I just don't know that he affects them positively enough to just
Cody Martin, just get it done.
Just do it. Let's see.
Would you do something like, I don't know if they're this out on Dieng, but it's like, give Dieng for Chris Boucher. Like, we just need another like type of to hedge against the Holmgren and Hartenstein.
That's what I was about to say. Like, is this where we have to mention like Boucher and Olynyk and stuff?
Brief.
Yeah. The thing is, like, if they're healthy, they have their spacing big in Chet. And so like, it's not the same as like the Clippers, for example. It's like, oh my God, what a change of pace someone like Boucher would give us. Again, though, the Thunder are really in a position where like anything they do is just to add like a luxury item, which Boucher I think would be, but so do it. Because why not? You can't use all these picks.
They have so many options. I think there's a strong case for them to stand pat. They are the best team in the NBA, maybe no worse than the second best team in the NBA right now. I do think this would be the postseason, and you can make an excuse if Chet for some reason isn't healthy, but like they might have to recalibrate if they go through this postseason with this core and they deal with a lot of the same offensive problems they ended up dealing with by the time they
It's weird to say about a team this good, but it's like you still are kind of trying to decide what you actually need by seeing it in
pretty fucking great spot to be.
Right.
Most likely player to be traded.
I'd say Dieng. I don't see a future for him, and I could see a team wanting him, and the number is small enough to where it kind of fits into whatever construction you want to build as a trade package.
Yeah, if their entire front court was healthy, maybe you make a case for big Jalen Williams, but I just don't know who else is. I just don't know who else would be the candidate here for that. It might even just be because even if they just want to take someone into their room exception, you have to make sure that you have a roster spot available there too.
Yeah. You know what the thought that occurred to me as I'm looking at their cap sheet for trade candidates is like, What if Topic just is the creator that they actually really need, and he's just in the rotation next year, and then suddenly we don't have any issues at all?
That, you know what's tough about that though, because I likened him, by the way, my pro comp for him. Do you remember was Shea Gilgeous-Alexander?
Right.
So, but the issue
So he's
there
duplicative, is what you're saying. They
right, you got to get rid of Shea because he's duplicative with Nikola Topic. The issue, and it's not a terrible issue, but like let's say they struggle again offensively in the playoffs. In their mind, like, well, we might just have the answer on the roster again. That gets into iffy territory because you're still then relying on a rookie.
Yep. Then you're getting a little too close to Orlando's roster building approach, where it's like we trust in our development. We're just going to let these guys get better and maybe actually never solve the problem.
Our next team, Mr. Hughes, I believe they are your team.
I just did the Thunder. It's your turn. Stop trying to
do the Blazers. They are $3.7 million below the tax because apparently teams this bad can be that close to the tax. Good for them. Tax concerns next year. I've seen a lot of people mention this. They seem a little bit overblown. I don't think it'll inform heavily what they do at the deadline. They project to be about $5 million under the tax if everyone comes back and they have a top 5 pick. So if they think they're going to get the number 1 pick and they just want to make sure, like, you could figure out a way to duck it then, but I've seen a lot of people kind of use that as spin for making trades now. I think that's overblown. Their 2005 first round pick, Grant, is going to Chicago, but it's lottery protected, so it's not going to Chicago. It is lottery protected through 2028.
It's not going ever.
That's a bonkers protection strategy. And then it turns into a second round pick. They have 1 extra first round pick. It'll come from Milwaukee or Boston in 2029. The way it works is Portland gets the most and least favorable of its own, Boston's and Milwaukee's picks in 2029. And they have swap rights with Milwaukee in 2028 and 30. Is that correct? I think so. Grant, what do we talk about with this team before we get into they shouldn't be, they have needs. They definitely need more shooting on this team, but I'm not sitting there saying, let's go out and buy shooting. I think you look at it in a way of saying, of the players that we probably should be trading, is there a way maybe we get some shooting back as part of that deal?
Sure. Yeah. I think their needs, their primary need is a cornerstone that's obvious, which they don't have. You're not trading for that right now. Obviously, they're 1B is how do we get cheaper to sort of make it make sense with how bad we are and how early we are in our rebuild. How do we get our books to look like that of a team that is as early in this process as we are, which would include Jeremy Grant moving, which would include DeAndre Ayton, Anthony Simons, on down the list. This is the more you look at this team, the wilder it gets. Some of the financial decisions they made and the situation that they're in with how bad, I don't know. It doesn't weirdly feel totally disastrous. But it's really what they're paying this roster is so out is maybe what team's payroll is more out of step with its performance than Portland right now. And so that to me just is? Yeah, well, which that is destroyed by injuries. That is, you know what I mean? So yeah. I think for the Blazers, it's just how do we get our payroll into a sensible, strata. It's insane some of the contracts they have on their books right now. So, and the double the double whammy of it all is to move them, you probably need to give up either young players or draft picks, and those are the very last things a team like Portland should be looking to get rid of.
Are you at the point that you would give Jeremy Grant up without receiving a first round pick in return?
If I can get one semi-projectable young player.
Oh, okay. I was like,
I get it. I'm not getting picks. If I can get one player that I can look at and say he might be something, in 3 years, I think that's probably, I think I would do it. I just don't know, because clearly you're not going to get those picks. Nobody's put them on the table. I
don't even know who the Jeremy Grant team is at the moment.
I mean, you could throw out the Lakers. That's one you hear mentioned sometimes.
So if you're getting Rui, Gabe Vincent, and Jared Vanderbilt,
and I'm not getting my young player there, but then the Lakers don't have that guy, so they're not.
Rui Hachimura is the interesting young player in that scenario.
Can Max Christie be involved? Would they even do that?
Would you say no? I don't think the Lakers would. You could also make a case that Rui Hachimura has been better than Jeremy Grant this year on offense for sure.
Well, Then, I mean, bigger picture question, do you just hold on to Jeremy Grant and he becomes like perhaps like more valuable as there are fewer years left on his deal and maybe he plays
Maybe.
better next year? That's rough because you're just winding the clock back as Portland, the longer you wait.
I worry what that means about like your overall floor balance, but he has not inhibited like Denny Avdija has gotten better for them from where he was the middle of this year, beginning of this year, excuse me. Toumani Camara has been fantastic for them. So I don't like that's an interesting stance to take, but like, you're just okay as the Blazers. Okay. Everybody's just still on this roster leading into the offseason. Do you think that they're bad enough to like, okay, none of this because Chauncey Billups isn't going to stop playing these guys.
Yeah. No, I'm not okay with that. But but I think I don't know what your alternatives are. So like the guys that they definitely could trade, Avdia. I still think Simons because
You can't. Are you getting as much for Avdia as you gave up for Avdia?
That's again. So what do you hold on to him? Like I just don't know. But I think you can get positive. How about this? You can get positive value for Avdia.
Oh yeah,
I think you can get positive value for Simons with the right team. He's maybe borderline. I think you get positive value for RW3. I think Kamara, you definitely get positive value for. And then
I think
like
you probably get in terms of what's the player on this roster that would get you multiple first round picks in a trade. The only two I'm confident in saying would get you multiple first round picks are probably like Toumani Camara and Donovan Clingan. I don't know if it's like Scoot's been better. Are you giving up 2 firsts for Scoot?
Sharp
Would
probably
you give up
doesn't.
2 firsts for Sharp? Has he shown it like to that degree?
No, that's what I'm saying. It's like that's who you. I don't know. You might get one. So that is illustrative of what we're dealing with here. Is like the guys you really really want to trade, you definitely can't get multiple firsts for. We got to focus on the guys they can move. Can we get
actually? I think you made an interesting point because you even look at how well maybe you'd like him to play more, and but like Donovan Clingan, the current setup, like having these veterans and injuries have taken care of some of it. Like that hasn't inhibited his development either. Like he's probably going to make an all rookie team. He's been really good. So is there more? If you could just, make Chauncey Billups understand the plot. It's like, some of these guys don't see the light of day after February 6th. And we're going to lead into the development because you're bad enough. You're third worst in the West. You're not going to out-tank some of these teams anyway. I actually hadn't thought about them. I assumed that they were going to trade I probably would trade Robert Williams III just to let's make sure there's no one standing in the way of let's maximize his. I want to see I want to test the stamina of Donovan Clingan of how many minutes that he can log. So let's clear up the big man glut. And me personally, if I could get shorter term money and just get rid of Grant, and now I'm all in on the Avdia, the Toumani Camara experience, and then opening up some minutes for just even the Chris Murrays and the Rupairs, and even if the Shane Sharps of the world, Matisse Thybulle, whatever, I would consider doing something like that. Simons, I don't disagree with you. I just feel more strongly. I think you definitely get positive value. You get a first round pick for him. I just view him as just needing someone to open up the floor. He's the only player on this team that I'm confident can do that. And if you're only getting a first round pick, if Orlando came and said, okay, here's Jet Howard and a first round pick, or Tristan Da Silva and a first round pick and then salary, that probably gets me to do it. But I can't, and I'm only getting one first round pick that's not, the Philly pick from OKC. I might just hold on to him at this point.
Well, it's a little bit like the Grant argument of maybe just now's not the time to get the most you're going to get for him. If it's Gary Harris and a first and something for Simons, just do it.
That's fair.
Just do it. I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm thinking of it from the fan perspective of what are you selling right now as a franchise? What are you you can't really if Scoot were what we thought he was going to be, then this is a very different conversation. I think the fact that he's not is just well, you got to bottom out. You got to hoard draft. It's just the most basic rebuild plan. They should be, except you have all these expensive contracts on the books that you can't just wait till they all run out. So I'm ready to move any kind of big salary for just almost just to do it at this point. I don't know. That's probably pretty extreme, but You know what I mean? Like I don't need much to move even a guy like Simons, who I agree is more valuable than your Aitons or Grants or whatever.
They're in a weird spot, which is not to say a bad, because Scoot has been verging on fantastic lately, which is super encouraging. Shaden Sharp, the additional self-creation he shouldered, encouraging. Donovan Quinn, good. But the problem is, so you have a bunch of the Toumani Camara, excellent. You have a couple lottery tickets, I would say 2, in terms of looking at, could this player be the person around whom we build everything? It's Scoot or Shaden. They don't have, it's Donovan Quinn is just not the type of dude that you do that for. So it's a weird spot, but it's nowhere near hopeless. I just don't understand. Like, they sat on Jeremy Grant too long. That deal was curious in the moment. And then there was talk like they needed at least 2 first-round picks at the beginning of the season. That might not be enough. They sat on him too long, and that's probably their biggest folly.
Yeah, I think that's right. You can't, I was going to say, like, there's a way they come out of this deadline where we feel way better about them, right? If they do move, like, I think Robert Williams, there's enough, we've talked about him enough, and there's enough teams that are like, yeah, that could be the guy that makes sense for us. They can get something for him. I think they can get something for Duop Reith. I don't know what that gets you, but he should certainly be in some level of demand. Simons, I think you can move. If you just come out of this with, you still have Grant on the books, and that's like kind of your only remaining deal that you don't love, like, one, that's actually plausible to me. And 2, like, I just feel way better about Portland going into post deadline existence if that's where we are.
Who's your most likely player to be traded?
I think it's Williams. I think there's enough teams, and his number is low enough that I think there'll be you'll have multiple offers, I think, for him, that you, as Portland, you'll be choosing between multiple, like, positive value packages. So I would just go with him.
I went with Duop Reith because he's so cheap, and there seems to be like so many teams that just want reserve bigs right now.
Yeah.
Grant, one team left. We made it.
Here it is.
Utah Jazz. This is your team, right?
27.2 million below the tax. Not a lot of financial concern.
Julius Randle, come home.
Come on. Was he from Utah?
No, I think he's from Texas.
Okay. It's close, I guess. Their 25 first is going to the Thunder with top 10 protection. So it is not going to the Thunder. Top 8 in 2026. That obligation goes away if it's not conveyed. Love those disappearing picks. They just traded for Phoenix's 2031 first rounder, Danny Ainge Special, and they're giving up the least favorable of theirs, the Cavs and Minnesota's first rounders in 25, 27, and 29. The Jazz are like, they've got the Colin Sextons and the John Collinses and the Jordan Clarksons, and who am I forgetting? Those are the main ones, all ready to go if you're willing to give
Eubanks, up. He might be available.
This is my little mini, like, trade deadline soapbox thing. Don't trade Walker Kessler. They're
not going to. That always felt.
Yeah, we need, like, that's, you know what? Is he the closest thing? They don't have a cornerstone. Is he the closest thing to, like, yeah, we're sure this guy is going to be a multi-year starter that they have right now?
I'm just hope for Cody Williams. No, I still think it's Keontae George.
That's the guy you'd tab, but any higher ceiling, obviously, just because of the player type and the upside and stuff. But, like, if you're the Jazz, I think Kessler, unless I don't know what kind of offer it would need to be, but I'm just not trading Kessler. So their needs are, I mean, if you want to talk about
wings, you think they could get Agbaji from Toronto, or is that like
he's too small? He's too small. I think I'd take the equivalent of a bad first round pick for him. Actually, if you're trying to build the team, sure, wings, guys, basically it's like anybody that plays positions or fills a role that makes life easier on George, Kessler, Cody Williams, Isaiah Collier, if you want to throw them in there. So that's just 3-and-D wings that are, not high usage players, basically. Realistically, though, it's just you're still in pick hoarding mode and trying to move salaries or even take on bad salary with picks attached.
Do you think of all the rebuilding teams, though, and I'm not including San Antonio here, that they have the most license to say, hey, like, if someone just became available that's younger, that would cost you actual picks, or maybe even one of your younger guys, that they're the team that should consider it, or no?
Well, just because they already have, like, Markkanen, for example.
They have Markkanen, and they have a shit ton of picks still.
Yeah. Probably. Well, yeah, because free agency for Utah is not what it is for a lot of other teams. And so if you can trade for someone, I mean, that must have been, I mean, Markkanen was like, nobody thought Markkanen was
That
going
was,
to do
yeah,
what he was.
he was basically salary filler in that
Right.
deal.
But like that being said, trades are the way that the trades in the draft are the way that the Jazz get their next great roster. It's not free agency. So in that sense, yes, they are the rebuilder that's like, oh, we can just trade for someone that like maybe fits, but like it's kind of like the best you're gonna do. I think that's fair.
I'm trying to think of who would be good enough though for them just to make this conversation more interesting. Then are they going to trade Clarkson, Collins, or Sec? Who's most likely to be traded? I'm going to name a couple guys. Are they good enough for the Jazz? Kobe White.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, he would be their second best player just right away.
Well, yes, but like in terms, like he's only has 1 year left on his deal. You have to factor that in.
I think you overpay to keep him if you can.
Okay.
But just get again. That's to your point. Like get the guy on board, and then just hope that he likes what he sees enough to keep him because you can't.
I should have saved him for last because he was like one of my fringe names. I was going to say LaMelo Ball.
I mean, what a fun fit in Utah. Yeah, can you keep LaMelo Ball?
He's under contract for another 4 years, so yes.
Well, tell De'Aaron Fox what a contract means, Dan.
What about De'Aaron Fox?
Ooh. Do you think he was on? I don't think he's there. They're on his destination list.
So let's just assume that these players would at least stay or be open to staying.
Okay.
Would be the assumption. I'm at the point where until free agency changes, I'm going to assume that bird rights are just more important than they've arguably ever been.
So your answer is yes to everyone you said unequivocally.
No, I actually probably wouldn't do it for De'Aaron Fox because I think that he would leave.
Yeah. Ball. Yeah. Right. I think. Well, I mean, is he likely? He's probably likelier to leave than Kobe White, just for very different reasons. Yeah, I think so. The risk for Utah is that like you do snap up, whatever the next best thing is that comes along because you don't think you're ever going to be able to sign anybody. So you take, you could go on 10 more players on your list and they're just like, yeah, we'll take that guy. And then it's just like you lock yourself into being not good enough, except they got all those picks. So you can kind of trade your way out of any kind of trouble you get into. Not that that's an ideal rebuild strategy.
I'm trying to get you to really think. What about Sabonis?
Oh, man. Well, are you trading Kessler? Because I've already laid out my stance on Walker Kessler trades.
Sabonis and Markkanen would be a pretty intriguing front court, though.
That would be kind of fun. Man. Yeah, why not?
I didn't think you were going to say yes.
Let's set the floor high. Yeah, we don't know what the ceiling is, but we're setting the floor.
So yeah, they could be interesting in that way. I don't expect them to act that way, but like that would be like I would totally consider. I mean, they just gave away like some throwaway first round picks. Like if they could have just given those 3 first round picks for Kobe White, like I might have. Would you prefer that or Phoenix's 2031 first?
Wait, what? 2031 first from Phoenix versus what?
Kobe White.
Man, it's so far away. Any pick that far off is really hard. I just think that pick is going to be really good. If you told me I was going to keep Kobe White, I'd take Kobe White. How about that?
I think I would too.
Can I get that concession from you?
I wouldn't completely rule it out for Utah to do something like that just because Danny Ainge he's the king of almost, although I think the Kings front office is now the king of almost. They like to leak how they've almost got. What are we at? Cam Johnson, John Collins, Pascal Siakam. They were involved in OG Anunoby. The list goes on. Most likely player to be traded here, though.
Well, it's got to come from the Sexton, Clarkson, Collins pod.
Eubanks. I guess. Come on, all those reserve bigs.
I think it's Sexton. Isn't it Sexton? I can imagine more teams being interested in him.
So I think there are 2 ways to make that argument. Is one to dismiss it as wrong. And then 2, just saying like that the market is so barren right now that some team with modest assets is going to come calling and maybe you get 2 first round picks or picking a young player for him. But I'm also just looking at it and thinking De'Aaron Fox is now on the trade market. That might hurt Colin Sexton in terms of which teams are going to make him their top priority. So I almost feel like Jordan Clarkson's my answer because he's cheaper, and I think the Jazz would part with him in exchange for second-round compensation.
So he's making 14 this year next. Sexton's 18 this year, 19 next. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess it does reasonably.
Look,
I
is
still
that
think
the
Sexton.
Najee and Dario Saric deal with swaps for Jordan Clarkson?
Do it. Is there a way for the Jazz? Like we just did the Pelicans a minute ago, but like if the Pelicans, not that they would do this because of what we just talked about, but like, is there if it's not New Orleans, is there a team out there that has a contract that just the classic like here's just a garbage 30 million this year and next or whatever, and we're attaching picks to it? Is that even an option for Utah? Like I'm struggling to
Why
think of the
not?
team that has that
Patrick
available.
Williams in Chicago?
That's a lot of Patrick Williams talk. I think if that's it, the landscape has really changed in the league because it used to be real easy to find bad money that you could get picks with. And that just, that just isn't a thing now. Is that where we are?
It mattered more when free agency was a thing, and free agency hasn't been a thing in like what? Since Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving went to Brooklyn, basically.
Because you do it to clear money because you had plans to go sign player X, right? And it's a rough time to be a dumping ground because nobody's got anything that they're looking to dump because nobody's able to sign anybody.
Right. And like, I think the cost of it is just lowered. Like we kind of like with Detroit and Tim Hardaway, just like, oh, they got 3 seconds and still had to give up some stuff there. So maybe there's a team like maybe Philly. Like, I don't think they're going to give you a first, but like if Philly's looking to duck the tax, would you help them like KJ Martin and who? Would you take Andre Drummond and KJ Martin and send back, what? Drew Eubanks or send him to it? Like you could facilitate it that way. And maybe like that's something they should absolutely consider as Utah.
Yeah, I agree. There's no more like, oh, you're getting a real first to take on 25 million or 30 million of bad money. Which is a bummer. I mean, like that's what they should be doing. I gotta just change my normal course of business for talking about teams like this because that's just not on the
Warriors
table.
would give 25 first to get off Dre, or is that
Can we move off Andrew Wiggins and Draymond Green and just the Warriors are free agent destination. So,
And what's also challenging is like if that stuff happens, not that it tends to happen. I mean, you'd want expiring contracts, but like a lot of these teams are also what I think has changed. We have 14 teams in the luxury tax right now. So they're looking to save money now. And that's just so much harder to do mid-season when you have some teams with exceptions and like Utah's so flexible beneath the tax, but you still need to make the math work. And that's what becomes a challenge as well.
Yeah. Did you get any podcast ruining notifications during our nearly 3-hour record?
Well, yeah, I actually was going to ask you if you were ready to talk about this Jimmy Butler trade.
Stop it.
Grant, we did it in under 3 hours. Another brief podcast from Hardwood Knocks. Are you ready to take us out of here?
That's what happens when you do an hour on the Kings and Spurs. Got to hit those big markets. Good job by us. And thanks, everybody.
What did we pitch to Utah? Like, who were we sending to Utah?
Jimmy Butler, I think.
Kobe White. Like, we're trying to get Utah to get Kobe White. Yeah, you're welcome for that type of hashtag.
Yeah, we got to be thorough.
We said they need wings and proceeded to name a bunch of guards.
And then talk about the macro issues facing NBA teams that have bad salary and what to do with it. That's definitely enough, I think, out of both of us. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. If you're checking this out on YouTube, make sure you're subscribed there. Make sure you're leaving some comments, join the conversation there, help the algorithm. Love us. Share this with your friends, with your enemies. Rate, review, and subscribe wherever you're listening to this on your podcast player of choice. I think that's going to do it. Marathon Western Conference trade primer. Had to do it. Shouts Frank Ntilikina. Apologies, Jared Allen.